the mental transmitter of Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401 Hulk. Under Alex's persistent pleading and harassment, Reed finally agreed to Alex's request, but he also imposed a condition: I'll grant you permission, but the entire copying process must be under my control. With his own brain at stake, Reed was wary of taking matters into his own hands, even though Alex had been so friendly. No problem, Alex agreed immediately. I'll just be responsible for telepathically linking your memories. Everything else is up to you. You decide what to copy? Reed looked at Alex in surprise. Is that okay? He shook his head, his brow furrowed in confusion. No, I don't have telepathy. I can't take control. I can temporarily grant you telepathic abilities, Alex explained, smiling at Reed's skeptical expression. Reed suddenly looked up at Alex, his eyes puffy with shock. There's been a breakthrough lately, Alex said, without going into detail. He then brought the conversation back to the asteroid project. We don't have much time, let's get started. Reed was intrigued by Alex's ability and was about to ask about it when Alex interrupted him again. It's too much trouble to explain. I'll tell you telepathically later. Alex had a good impression of Reed, and since he'd been asking for his help, sharing a few secrets wasn't a problem. As he spoke, Alex placed his hand on Reed's forehead, activated telepathy, and handed him a detailed description of his newfound ability. He also warned, this is a secret. Don't tell anyone else. Reed immediately absorbed Alex's information, absorbing it completely in a flash. It was much easier to understand than relying on verbal explanations. After understanding it, Reed was captivated by it for a long time, not only by Alex's new ability but also by this convenient way of transmitting information. Keeping his promise, Alex didn't probe Reed's mind, waiting for Reed to make a move. But after a long moment, Reed didn't respond. Alex couldn't help but ask, Reed, what are you doing? Reed snapped back to his senses at the sound of Alex's voice and quickly apologized. Sorry, I was lost in thought. The information Alex had relayed was invaluable to Reed, especially his ability to grant other superpowers. While it had its limitations, it was a promising area of research. Who knows, perhaps even a future where all humans could become superhumans. Alex couldn't help but roll his eyes. That was the downside of science, often lost in their own world, oblivious to outsiders. Reed, a scientist among scientists, embodied this trait. Recovering without further delay, Reed packed up all the information he had on the asteroid project and telepathically transmitted it to Alex. There's a lot to cover, so be careful. Don't make any mistakes. Planet construction was a massive undertaking, a delicate one. Numerous factors needed to be considered, including gravity, cosmic dust, and so on. A single mistake could lead to disaster. Alex, fully aware of this, nodded cautiously. I know. I'll be careful. After bidding farewell to Reed, Alex considered the matter and decided to visit Stark Industries first. Though he professed no worries, Alex felt a sense of uncertainty. After all, this world was a world away from the movie world he knew. Without alerting anyone, Alex quietly sought out the bald CEO of Stark Industries. In the movie, it was he who had secretly colluded with the terrorists to kidnap Tony Stark. Through telepathy, Alex easily determined the terrorists' hideout and approached them without a word. When Alex found the dimly lit cave, Tony Stark was already crafting the original Iron Man suit. His stubbled face was itched with fatigue, but his eyes held a unique brilliance. After the terrorist attack, Tony Stark had clearly matured. Stay here. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the reborn Tony Stark. Although he had found Tony Stark, Alex made no plans to rescue him. Without going through hardships, Tony Stark wouldn't have become Iron Man. Without leaving any trace, Alex returned to New York, to Stark Industries, to Pepper's office. Although Tony Stark had disappeared, Stark Industries continued to operate, and Pepper continued to perform her duties as Tony's assistant. However, the accumulated worry and fatigue had left Pepper mentally exhausted, and her face was haggard, as if she had suffered a serious illness. Alex ran into Pepper while searching for Baldy. After confirming Tony's whereabouts, he decided to tell her about Tony's whereabouts to prevent her from worrying further. Mr. Alex appeared in front of Pepper openly. Startled, Pepper jumped up from her chair, but her body felt weak from rising so quickly. She let out a cry of pain and sat back down weakly. Alex felt deeply for Pepper Potts. From a distance, he channeled a stream of elixir energy into her to heal her, saying, "I've come to tell you that Tony's still alive. Where's Tony?" Upon hearing the news, Pepper Potts jumped to her feet again, tears welling up in her eyes. Alex looked at her awkwardly, saying, "Tony has some things to attend to right now, so he can't be back for a while." Pepper Potts paused, looking at him pleadingly, like a kitten begging for food. "Tony's really fine, Mr. Alex. You're not lying to me, are you? Don't worry, Tony will be back in 3 to 5 months." Not daring to meet Pepper Potts's gaze, Alex uttered this and ran off. He left Stark Industries in a panic, teleporting back to the streets of New York. Glancing around, he was about to depart for space when he spotted a tall figure jumping up and down not far away, then vanishing into the darkness in an instant. "Who is this?" Alex looked at the black shadow going away with a puzzled look on his face full of surprise. Could it be that there is a new hero in New York? With a hint of curiosity, Alex immediately chased after it. The tall figure was very fast, and it could cover hundreds of meters with one jump, but it was far slower than teleportation. In just a few seconds, Alex caught up with it. Seeing the green skin, Alex finally understood who it was: the former Bruce Banner, and now the Hulk. Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, the Avengers are almost complete. Looking at the Hulk not far away, Alex's mood suddenly became low, and he sighed and whispered, "Only you are missing, Steve." The Hulk officially appeared. Chapter 402, Battle with Hulk. Just as Alex was lost in thoughts of Steve, the Hulk suddenly turned, glaring at him with eyes as sharp as copper bells. With a furious roar, he lunged at him. Feeling the gust of wind against his face, Alex snapped back to reality. He looked up to see the Hulk's massive body crashing down on him. What the hell? Alex didn't have time to react before the Hulk pinned him to the ground, his entire body sinking into the ground. The Hulk, despite his blow, didn't give up, swinging his arms and continuing to pummel Alex. Alex was stunned, and it took him a moment to react. He yelled at the Hulk, "Hit me again and I'll be angry, Hulk." Alex's body was incredibly strong, and with his energy absorption system, no amount of Hulk strength could hurt him. But being beaten like that was truly humiliating. The Hulk paid no heed to Alex's threats. He pumped his fists with gusto, a satisfied smile plastered across his face, 3 times larger than a normal man's. It was clear he was using Alex as a target for his anger. That was a good fight, wasn't it? Hulk was pleased, but Alex was furious. "Shame on you." With a snort, Alex teleported Hulk out of New York and into desolate desert. New York was the Big Apple. If Alex and Hulk fought there, the city would be destroyed. Hulk was caught off guard by the sudden transformation into desert. A flicker of confusion flashed across his frantic eyes, and his fists faltered. Alex seized the opportunity to swerve and escape the Hulk. Ultimately, Alex refused to engage the Hulk. After freeing himself from the Hulk's grasp, he didn't immediately attack. Instead, he pleaded, "Hulk, there's still time to stop." Unfortunately, the Hulk wasn't Bruce Banner anymore. He had lost his mind, his focus on destruction. With another roar, the Hulk leaped to his feet, lunging at Alex once more. "If that's the case, don't blame me." Alex stared blankly at the approaching Hulk, shaking his fists and smiling as he met him. The Hulk's fighting power was immense. In the movies, even Thor couldn't stand up to him, and Loki was left in tears. Alex felt he had no way of truly defeating the Hulk, a creature whose rage grew stronger and whose power was practically limitless, a bug-like existence. However, Alex's desire to defeat the Hulk wasn't as difficult as it seemed, for Alex himself was even more buggy than the Hulk. Like a cosmic collision, Alex and the Hulk collided. The Hulk's power was beyond Alex's imagination, and the immense recoil made Alex feel as if his body was about to collapse. At that moment, his energy absorption seemed to have lost its effect. Alex's body flew backward like a cannonball, plunging headfirst into the ground, creating a gully over 10 meters long. Looking at the other side, Hulk was like nothing happened, and rushed up again with another roar. Alex got out of the ground with difficulty, looking a little embarrassed. Alex had originally overestimated Hulk's strength, but he didn't expect that he underestimated it in the end, and was taught a lesson by Hulk. Looking at the smug smile on Hulk's face as he pounced on him, Alex couldn't help but sigh. This body, this strength, it's really unparalleled. Alex has also been in the universe, seen many races, and fought with Thanos, but there is really no one who can arm wrestle with Hulk. What's more, Hulk's strength will continue to increase with anger. It is very unwise to desert during a battle. Alex was soon taught a lesson. And Hulk's fist hit Alex hard to wake him up. Okay, I admit, I'm not as strong as you. Alex took a few punches and admitted this fact with a gloomy look on his face. Then he turned around and said sincerely, but in other aspects, you're not as good as me. As soon as he finished speaking, Alex's body suddenly leaped, leaving a shadow behind, and he had jumped onto Hulk's shoulders. Hulk, let me teach you how to fight. Alex leaped high into the air, and with a crackling sound, he delivered a whip kick to Hulk's head. Hulk's head swayed, and his body swayed with it. Even Hulk's reaction showed the terrifying power of Alex's kick. After a moment, Hulk finally came to his senses. He shook his head and looked at Alex, who had landed on the ground. His anger surged, and with a roar, he rushed towards Alex, even faster than Alex had just done. What a pervert, Alex muttered, noticing the Hulk's increased strength. He didn't shy away from the Hulk's attacks, but charged forward. Avoiding a head-on encounter, Alex deftly dodged the Hulk's body, landing a powerful punch on the Hulk's midsection. Before the Hulk could react, Alex spun behind the Hulk, raining punches down upon his back. As he did so, Alex shouted, "You felt so good hitting me just now, now it's my turn." Feeling the relentless blows from behind, the Hulk grew furious and spun quickly, attempting to catch Alex. However, Alex spun around the Hulk like a fish, circling him until the Hulk nearly fainted, yet he couldn't even catch a glimpse of Alex. The constant beatings and inability to catch him intensified the Hulk's rage, and his already massive body suddenly expanded, his speed and reflexes increasing dramatically. Alex felt helpless as he watched the Hulk, now stronger than ever, lash out at him. He'd already dealt him at least 500 or 600 blows. If it had been a sword fight, he'd have been on the ground long ago. Even Thanos would have been injured. But the Hulk didn't react at all. Each punch felt like a tickle. It hadn't had any effect to begin with, and now the Hulk had become even stronger. Alex was completely helpless, at least not physically. He dodged the Hulk, preparing to deliver one last, powerful blow before withdrawing. This fight had happened inexplicably, and continuing would be fruitless. It might as well have ended sooner rather than later. While pondering, Alex looked up at the Hulk and shouted, "Hulk, one last move. I'm leaving after this." Regardless of whether the Hulk understood or not, Alex summoned a steel ball and then, activating a magnetic field, instantly accelerated the ball to its maximum speed. It pierced the void and appeared directly in front of the Hulk. Before the Hulk could react, it pierced through the Hulk's sturdy body, leaving a hole the thickness of a thumb. "I'm leaving. I won't see you off." Seeing that his electromagnetic cannon had finally damaged the Hulk, Alex felt a sense of pride. He waved at the Hulk and disappeared. Seeing Alex suddenly disappear, the Hulk suddenly realized what was happening. His anger almost broke through, and he wanted to seek revenge on Alex, but there was no trace of Alex. Instead, the thumb-sized hole disappeared in an instant. If Alex saw this, he would probably sigh. This self-healing ability is unmatched. The Hulk's fighting power was through the roof. Chapter 403, Mandarin and Mr. Sinister. After freeing himself from the Hulk, Alex teleported directly to the Death Star and began preparing to construct the asteroid. Under the control of a powerful magnetic field, Alex perfectly disintegrated the Death Star base, originally constructed by Magneto, into countless materials that would become the foundation of the new asteroid. After dismantling the Death Star, Alex carefully began working according to Reed's design from his memory. Reed's actual asteroid design was 3 times larger than the Death Star base, and Alex's powerful magnetic field could only barely cover it. The process also required careful consideration of numerous details and a tremendous mental effort, undoubtedly a tremendous test for Alex. To avoid distraction and danger, Alex surrounded himself with a strict magical barrier to prevent interference and fully devote himself to the asteroid construction. While Alex was busy preparing the asteroid in space, Emma and other X-Men leaders gathered again in Earth's Mystic Valley, their brows furrowed and their expressions solemn. "Still can't contact Alex." Emma rubbed her brow and turned to Charles, a look of annoyance on her face. She was so excited about Alex's return that she'd forgotten something very important, and now trouble had come her way. Charles shook his head, a bitter expression on his face. "Alex is indeed in space now. I found his location, but he's surrounded by extremely tight security. My telepathy doesn't penetrate deeply, and I can't reach him at all." When trouble arose, Charles's first thought was to contact Alex. After searching Earth and failing to find him, he immediately turned his attention to space, but it was a pity that it ended up like this. The Mandarin disappeared for months. How did he suddenly appear again? Emma sighed softly, turning to look at the sage on the other side. Her tone was filled with resentment, and it was unclear whether she was blaming herself or the Mandarin. 3 months ago, shortly after Alex departed for the Chaos Realm, the Mandarin suddenly visited them, gave the X-Men a severe beating, and then left with the words, "Tell Alex to meet me in New York for safety reasons." Emma simply kept a close eye on the Mandarin, refusing to provoke him. Later, the Mandarin unleashed a bloody storm in New York. In just 2 days, he unified the entire New York Mafia, then expanded his influence across the United States and even the world. Within days, he had replaced the Kingpin as the new underworld Kingpin, forcing New York into his own domain. However, at this peak of his power, the Mandarin suddenly vanished, as if it were an illusion, as if he had never existed. No one knew where he was, whether he was dead or alive. Gradually, a rumor spread online that the US government had dispatched a secret weapon to kill the Mandarin. With no other explanation and fueled by the US government, the rumor gained credence, and the Mandarin instantly became a clown against the grandeur of America. The X-Men, including Emma, refused to believe the rumor. Upon learning of the Mandarin's disappearance, Emma immediately dispatched the X-Men to investigate. Sadly, nothing was found. The Mandarin had vanished, leaving no trace. 3 months passed unnoticed, and there was still no news of the Mandarin. Emma had even forgotten about him, even as he was in Java, until today, when she suddenly heard the news of his reappearance. "We don't know the details," Sage said, unfazed by Emma's tone. "But the Mandarin has been accompanied by someone else, Nathaniel Essex, formerly Mr. Sinister." Emma and the others had only heard of the Mandarin's reappearance, but the details were still unclear. Upon hearing Sage's words, they looked at each other in disbelief. How did these two get together? Emma and the others had vivid memories of Mr. Sinister. Many of them still had blood samples in his possession. When Apocalypse threatened the world, Mr. Sinister approached Alex, seeking cooperation in exchange for blood samples from Alex and several other mutants. Ultimately, Alex agreed to Mr. Sinister's demands. Originally, Alex had planned to retrieve the blood sample from Mr. Sinister as soon as Apocalypse was dealt with, but unfortunately, Mr. Sinister vanished without a trace after Apocalypse was dealt with. The two missing people reappeared at the same time and even got together. Furthermore, both of them had a grudge against Alex, so there must be a lot of secrets involved. "Send someone to space to find Alex immediately." Emma quickly came to her senses, her expression extremely serious. The Mandarin alone was enough to deal with, and with Mr. Sinister missing for so many years, things might not be that simple. Then we might have to ask the Fantastic Four for help. Charles had a lot of contact with the Fantastic Four because of the asteroid project, and they were the first people he thought of. Mutants have a variety of superpowers, but few can survive in space, so they can only rely on spacecraft. Emma nodded without further questioning. She turned to the other X-Men present and said in a deep voice, "From today on, everyone is on combat alert and ready to fight at any time." Emma coughed lightly and turned to look at Sage again. "Keep a close eye on the Mandarin. Find out as quickly as possible about his relationship with Mr. Sinister and their motives." Sage nodded in agreement without a word. New York, the headquarters of the Ten Rings. This 10 Rings is not the same 10 Rings as the previous one. They were founded by the Mandarin himself and were once quite prestigious. However, since the Mandarin's disappearance, the 10 Rings have become the target of a joint effort by the government and numerous organizations to eliminate them. Over the past few months, the 10 Rings have been practically defunct. "Is this your territory?" Mr. Sinister followed the Mandarin into the former base of the 10 Rings. It was a dilapidated place. "It doesn't look that good." The Mandarin looked a little embarrassed and snorted coldly. "Better than you, hiding in a rat hole." "That's not a rat hole, it's my laboratory." "A laboratory?" Mr. Sinister rolled his eyes and said unhappily, "All our achievements come from there, no mistake. 1 poem, 1 post, 1 content, 1 6, 1 book, 1 bar. Take a look." Hearing the voice, the Mandarin turned his head and glanced at the dozen or so figures standing upright behind him. A smile appeared on his gloomy face. "Yes, these guys are not bad. It's a pity for Alex's blood sample. I should have asked for more at the beginning." Mr. Sinister also turned around and looked at the other 2 figures behind him, muttering to himself. In a flash, Mr. Sinister came to his senses. He smiled and whispered with a smug look on his face, "Once we catch Alex, we can have as many as we want." Ha ha ha, I've been missing for so long too. Alex should be back. The Mandarin gave up the idea of packing up the base upon hearing Mr. Sinister's voice. Forget it, let's go find him directly, his place is quite nice. Chapter 404, Siege of the Academy. While the Mandarin and Mr. Sinister were discussing a direct attack, Charles had already arrived in New York and found Reed. "What did you say? The Mandarin's back again." When the Mandarin was wreaking havoc in New York, Reed had led the Fantastic Four in an attempt to stop him, but unfortunately, they were no match for the Mandarin. Despite his defeat, Reed refused to give up and plunged into his lab, determined to develop a way to counter the Mandarin. Unfortunately, before Reed could come up with a solution, the Mandarin had disappeared. Charles nodded and said solemnly, "Alex is in space. We can't contact him. We must take a spacecraft to find him." "Is it too late?" Reed frowned, his face serious. "Actually, I've developed a weapon to counter the Mandarin. We might not be a match for him, not just the Mandarin, but Mr. Sinister too." Charles smiled wryly and shook his head, his expression slightly glum. Deep down, Charles didn't want to rely on Alex for everything. He'd rather lead the X-Men to personally confront the Mandarin and Mr. Sinister. Having been defeated by the Mandarin in their initial encounter, Charles had been simmering with anger. Now, with this opportunity, it was time to prove his worth. However, Charles couldn't disobey Emma, and notifying Alex was essential. However, the spaceship wasn't very fast, so finding Alex would take time, enough time for the X-Men and the Mandarin to engage in a duel. "The Mandarin won't give us time, so we need to take action," Charles said, before Reed could even ask who Mr. Sinister was. "And I suspect they're up to something. Whatever it is, we must do everything we can to stop them." The matter was settled. As Reed prepared for the spaceship to take off, he unearthed the magical artifact he had been researching. The Mandarin's 10 rings each possessed 10 distinct powers. Already revealed were Ice Storm, Lightning, Fire, Cyclone, Black Body Beam, Gravitational Field, Shockwave, and Slicing Beam, with the remaining 2 rings' abilities still unknown. Of the 8 known abilities, energy attacks like ice storms and lightning, while powerful, aren't particularly effective against enemies, especially against experts. Black Body Beams, gravitational fields, and shockwaves are equally ineffective. The only thing Red truly fears is the cutting beam. During the previous battle, Reed's rubber body was damaged by the cutting beam, and it took a long time to recover. The cutting beam is essentially a beam of energy capable of destroying all bonds between matter, molecules, and elements, meaning nothing can remain intact under its influence. "What is this?" Charles was surprised to see Reed pull out a piece of transparent soft armor. As if anticipating Charles's reaction, Reed chuckled as he unfolded the armor, pointing to the dense spiral patterns on it and explaining, "The cutting beam's cutting process isn't instantaneous, it's a gradual process." Charles listened in amazement as Reed's relentless explanation unfolded, but for a long time, he didn't understand a single word. Charles wasn't concerned with the principle, he just wanted to know if the armor was effective. "Okay, Reed, just tell me, does this thing actually work?" Charles interrupted Reed, who was growing increasingly excited, pointing to the transparent soft armor and asking solemnly. Reed paused, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "The theory is completely sound, but the specific effectiveness is still uncertain." "Well, it should belong to Logan." Upon hearing Reed's words, Charles made a quick decision and thought of the most suitable owner for it. With Wolverine's unparalleled healing ability, as long as the cutting beam didn't hide a vital part and instantly disabled Logan, it wouldn't pose much of a threat. Having Logan test the effectiveness of the soft armor was the perfect opportunity. "That's a great idea." As he spoke, Charles' face suddenly changed, and he stood up from his chair, growling fiercely, "They're here to kill us. We must get back immediately." Just then, Charles received a telepathic message from Emma. The Mandarin and Mr. Sinister had already arrived at Uncanny Valley, accompanied by a large group of men. "The ship's ready, let's go." Reed stood up decisively, his actions making his point clear. Ordinary teleporters' teleportation abilities were certainly inferior to Alex's, and it took several minutes for Charles and his team to scramble back. The situation on the field was somewhat unexpected. A large group of people were engaged in a chaotic battle in the open space in front of Academy X, while the Mandarin and Mr. Sinister stood on the periphery, watching calmly, never engaging in any action. Confused, Charles approached Emma and the others, who were also standing on the periphery, facing the Mandarin and Mr. Sinister from a distance, and whispered, bewildered, "What's going on, sparring?" Someone replied, but Charles paid no attention. His gaze had already involuntarily turned to the battlefield, and as he watched, his brows slowly furrowed, his expression becoming solemn. The Mandarin commanded a group of bio-warriors reanimated from the Terracotta Army. They were not only invulnerable to weapons but also indestructible. Even if they were reduced to rubble, they would spring back to life in a moment. Fortunately, these bio-warriors were inanimate objects, lacking any combat skills, relying solely on physical attacks and charging. However, the terracotta warriors on the battlefield were noticeably different. Without their earthy gray skin, they looked more like living beings. They also seemed more intelligent, possessing combat techniques, making them somewhat difficult for the X-Men to handle. Just as Charles was thinking, he suddenly saw a bio-warrior burst into flames. The X-Men battling it were visibly startled, unable to react. The swirling flames instantly ignited his clothes. "What is this?" Charles couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The flames were emanating from the bio-warriors' bodies, looking remarkably like mutant abilities. Charles's expression changed, and Emma and the others watched in disbelief as each bio-warrior on the battlefield displayed various bizarre abilities, some boasting extreme speed, others with arms transformed into steel, and so on. Mr. Sinister, Charles's mind raced, and he immediately turned his gaze to Mr. Sinister, who was standing beside the Mandarin. Mr. Sinister had taken a lot of mutant blood samples from Alex, so these cyborgs were definitely connected to him. The Mandarin and Mr. Sinister were probably linked together for this very reason. Emma acted decisively, standing up and rushing towards the Mandarin and Mr. Sinister. The others followed suit, each targeting Mr. Sinister. Compared to the Mandarin, Mr. Sinister posed a greater threat to mutants. This was because Mr. Sinister held the lifeblood of mutants, the X gene. His modified cyborg mutants showed that Mr. Sinister had thoroughly researched the X gene. As superheroes appeared one after another, the villains had to come out and have a look. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405, Battle of the Academy, Part 1. The X gene is the key to distinguishing mutants from ordinary humans, and it's also the source of mutants' abilities. No one knows what the consequences will be if someone like Mr. Sinister abuses the X gene. To be on the safe side, mutants must eliminate him. With this conviction, Emma and the others attacked, determined to stop Mr. Sinister. Seeing Emma and the others charging towards him, Mr. Sinister smiled grimly, raised his hand, and unleashed a wave of energy. Midway through the wave, it suddenly exploded, creating a massive impact that sent Emma and the others flying backwards. "That's a pretty good ability," the Mandarin observed the somewhat bewildered X-Men, then turned to Mr. Sinister with a look of approval, though a sense of alarm built within him. The energy wave released by Sinister was clearly unique, otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible to send Emma and the others flying with a single blow. In his place, the Mandarin felt he wouldn't have been able to hold his own against a blast. Mr. Sinister smiled calmly, a hint of melancholy in his voice as he explained, "This is the ability Apocalypse bestowed upon me when he transformed me. Unfortunately, I've never been able to unlock it." Mr. Sinister was originally just an ordinary man, unexpectedly spotted by Apocalypse and transformed into his current form, possessing many powerful superpowers, energy waves being just one of them. "Apocalypse, I've heard of him." Upon hearing Mr. Sinister mention Apocalypse, a trace of solemnity crossed the Mandarin's proud face. He then sighed and said, "It's a pity I never got to meet him." When Apocalypse was born, the Mandarin was in seclusion and had never met Apocalypse, but this did not hinder his understanding of Apocalypse. "You'll have your chance," Mr. Sinister shrugged, his expression strangely composed, a mixture of relief and nervousness. The Mandarin was startled by this, staring at Mr. Sinister in disbelief. "Apocalypse isn't dead, Apocalypse is immortal." Mr. Sinister's expression returned to its icy coldness. He turned to Emma and the other X-Men, who were charging forward again. "Now, it's our turn." With that, Mr. Sinister flashed, appearing among the X-Men. He suddenly leaned close to Wolverine's ear and whispered something. Wolverine's body froze, his eyes glazing over, as if possessed. Due to his physical condition, Charles didn't charge forward. Instead, he stayed back to monitor the situation. He immediately noticed Logan's abnormality and prepared to activate his telepathy to awaken him. Before Charles could strike, the stunned Logan roared, spun around, and thrust his hands forward, piercing Mr. Sinister's chest with his adamantium claws before he could react. "I hate it when someone gets into my head." Mr. Sinister's face remained expressionless, his eyes calmly fixed on Logan. He whispered, "I get it. I'll never do that again." With that, Mr. Sinister thrust his fists, sending Logan flying. His chest wound healed in an instant. "Is this my power?" Wolverine pushed back with his feet, sliding 2 or 3 meters before coming to a stop. Looking up, he saw Mr. Sinister had returned to normal. Understanding dawned on him, and he glared fiercely at him. "Give me back what's mine!" With a deafening roar, Wolverine charged at Mr. Sinister once more. While Wolverine and Mr. Sinister were engaged, the Mandarin joined the fray. Emma immediately dispatched her men to deal with the Mandarin. Mr. Sinister was a formidable enemy of mutant kind, but the Mandarin was a far more formidable foe, one who must not be underestimated. "Where's Alex? Hasn't he come back yet?" The Mandarin put his hands behind his back and turned to look at the X-Men opposite him, who were on guard. His expression was extremely relaxed, as if he didn't take them seriously at all. At the back of the battlefield, Charles' attention was focused on the entire scene, but most of his energy was still on the Mandarin. The moment the Mandarin took action, Charles immediately contacted the X-Men in secret and arranged the troops through telepathy. After hearing what the Mandarin said, Charles did not respond and directly ordered the fight to begin. Because Wolverine and Mr. Sinister were entangled, Reed wore the soft armor he invented and stood at the front of the team, taking the lead in killing the Mandarin. The 10 Commandments are very powerful, and the Mandarin himself is also very powerful. In addition, he is also a martial arts master. Reed has suffered a loss once before, and now he dare not fight him in close combat. When he was still 5 steps away from the Mandarin, Reed swung his right arm. It stretched infinitely, then quickly returned to normal. As it swung, his fist, imbued with immense kinetic energy, struck the Mandarin's chest with unparalleled force like a rocket. "It's you, the Mandarin," remembering Reed, exclaimed in surprise. Suddenly, the ring on his left thumb lit up. Reed's mind was fixed on the Mandarin, particularly the ring. The moment it lit up, Reed knew what was about to happen. Just as he was about to brace himself, he felt a sudden jolt. Looking down, he saw a crack in his soft armor. A cutting beam. Reed paused for a moment before reacting. He looked up at the Mandarin in disbelief. He had clearly seen the gravity ring on his left thumb light up, while the ring with the cutting beam on his right ring finger remained silent. Reed looked at the Mandarin in confusion, while the Mandarin looked at him in surprise. His invincible slashing beam seemed to be blocked by the transparent soft armor, and some of it even bounced back. It must be an illusion. Charles, standing behind him, was also puzzled. After a long pause, he explained to Reed with certainty, "The ring on his finger must have psychic abilities. What you just saw was all an illusion, is that so?" Reed suddenly understood, but his expression grew serious. Is there any way to break it? If Reed continued to be affected by the illusion, he would be unable to predict the Mandarin's attacks, which would have a significant impact on him. Charles shook his head bitterly and replied telepathically, "Nothing for now. You can only rely on your willpower to resist." The illusion created by the Mandarin had even affected Charles himself. If it weren't for his immensely powerful mind, Charles would probably not have reacted in such a short time. Charles' words reached Emma and all the other X-Men's minds at the same time, and everyone looked at the Mandarin with increasing vigilance. Wolverine also heard Charles' voice, but he couldn't be distracted at the moment, as he was fighting fiercely with Mr. Sinister. But most of the time, Wolverine was the one who got beaten. The battle between high-end combat forces was in full swing, and the confrontation between the mutant biochemical warriors and the X-Men gradually entered garbage time. Faced with the almost unkillable mutant biochemical warriors, the X-Men knowingly chose to stick together. The melee fighters with strong defense blocked the attack from the outside, the ranged fighters with energy attacks launched a surprise attack from the inside, and the fighters with healing and mobility were surrounded in the middle, a standard warrior, mage, and priest combination. There is only one update today, and it will be made up tomorrow. Chapter 406, Battle of the Academy, Part 2. The mutant bio-warriors appeared formidable, but in reality, they were merely that. Their invincibility left the X-Men helpless, and as they traded wounds, they gradually fell into disadvantage. With a change in strategy, the two sides entered a stalemate. You can't do me, and I can't do you. The outcome of the battle came down to superior combat power. Under these circumstances, Emma and the others fought intensified, while Logan went completely berserk, desperate to kill Mr. Sinister. Although Mr. Sinister possessed self-healing abilities, ordinary injuries had no effect on him. Logan's adamantium claws continuously clawed at Mr. Sinister's head and limbs. His powerful healing abilities allowed Mr. Sinister to quickly recover from any injury, but a severed head or limb wouldn't be instantaneous, requiring some time to recuperate. Mr. Sinister, quick-witted, quickly discovered Logan's plot, a subtle smile etched upon his lips. Meanwhile, Reed, regrouping, led by Emma and the others, charged towards the Mandarin once again, becoming increasingly cautious. While the soft armor had blocked the cutting beam, its reaction showed it wasn't as effective as Reed had anticipated. If the same spot were hit 3 more times, it would likely break. More importantly, the Mandarin also employed illusions, making them completely unpredictable. Reed's cautiousness was met with a seriousness in the Mandarin's own mind, as he noticed something was amiss with him. He glanced around, as if searching for something. "What's going on, Charles?" His attention fixed on the Mandarin, immediately noticed his anomaly and asked through a telepathic link. As Charles finished speaking, Vivian Lee took a few steps behind him, but remained silent. "Really?" Charles stared at Vivian Lee in shock, seemingly unable to believe his eyes. Vivian nodded awkwardly, explaining, "I was just trying it, and I didn't expect it to work." Her brow furrowed slightly as she continued, somewhat helplessly, "But his will was so strong, my influence was minimal. Ever since being infected by Terrigan's divine mist, Vivian had developed a new ability, the ability to control others' emotions. Essentially, it could be considered a form of psychic ability, only more specific and less detectable, which was why the Mandarin had fallen prey to it so easily. When the ability first emerged, Vivian could only adjust the emotions of others based on her own. But after years of practice, Vivian now mastered the control of others' emotions, no longer mistaking friend for foe. Very useful. Charles praised Vivian's abilities telepathically, then laid out his plan. Try to make him anxious. An anxious person easily loses their composure and their control is greatly reduced. That way, we have a chance. Vivian nodded imperceptibly and replied, somewhat unsurely, "Okay, I'll try." Vivian's abilities were indeed miraculous, but as she herself said, their effect on the Mandarin was minimal. For a long time, the Mandarin showed no sign of changing, relying on the 10 rings to slaughter everyone. Reed, acting as a shield, had his transparent soft armor riddled with holes, seemingly unable to withstand the cutting beams. "I'm sorry, Vivian struggled to control the Mandarin's emotions, but to no avail. She felt a sense of shame, her anxiety only growing more chaotic, and the backlash was only backfiring. Her own emotions were becoming increasingly chaotic, and she was on the verge of tears. Charles sensed Vivian's mood was off and was about to speak when he noticed the Mandarin's movement suddenly falter, his face a touch of panic, tinged with deep confusion. Did it work? Charles stared at Vivian, tears welling up in his eyes, overjoyed. After a moment's pause, Vivian finally realized that she had acquired her powers less than 6 months ago, and even with her training and mastery of them, her effectiveness was lackluster. In her excitement, Vivian had lost some of her composure, unexpectedly stimulating her abilities and significantly affecting the Mandarin. Recognizing her, Vivian wiped away her tears, rallied, and immediately pressed on, preparing to expand her victory. Meanwhile, upon noticing the Mandarin's abnormality, Emma and the others sped up, rushing towards him like arrows from a bow, their single thought, to seize the 10 rings. Each of the 10 rings possesses a unique ability. Wearing them effectively grants the Mandarin 10 superpowers simultaneously, with virtually no power consumption. Even more terrifying, all 10 rings can be activated simultaneously. The combined power of all 10 rings is truly terrifying. Emma and the others had deeply felt their power during the previous encounter, which is why they chose to do so simultaneously. The Mandarin is still the Mandarin, and Vivian Lee's emotional control didn't last long. Within a second, the Mandarin regained consciousness. Recovering from his slumber, he snorted coldly, and all 10 rings illuminated simultaneously. 10 beams of light emanated from the rings on his fingers. Fire, lightning, and ice combined to create an unparalleled elemental storm. Crimson flames, silver lightning, and pale blue ice crystals intertwined to form a dazzling storm of death. The death storm enveloped Emma and the others in the blink of an eye. Amidst of frenzied flames, lightning, and snow, mingled with cutting beams and gravitational fields, it began to gradually erode their bodies. Emma's mental defenses collapsed in an instant, forcing her to transform into diamond to resist. Others like Alex, lacking Emma's diamond bodies, couldn't withstand the death storm for long. Fortunately, Reed intervened, transforming his own body into layers of protective shields, enveloping everyone. Reed's body possessed extreme elasticity, making him completely immune to physical attacks. While his resistance to energy attacks was somewhat weak, it was still better than that of the X-Men, save Emma. Reed struggled to control his body and escape, but he was completely immobilized by the Mandarin's gravitational field, completely confined. He watched helplessly as his body gradually crumbled beneath the death storm. Outside the battlefield, Charles was terrified. The Mandarin's unleashed power filled him with despair. "Sage, take the students," Charles, completely despairing, slumped dejectedly in his wheelchair, saying without turning back. However, at that moment, the death storm that had crushed everyone came to an abrupt end, and the Mandarin's furious roar rang out. Chapter 407, Late Arrival. What's going on? What happened? At that moment, these questions flashed through everyone's minds, and all eyes turned to the Mandarin. Even Emma and the other X-Men, freed by Reed's collapse, turned their heads to look. Even Logan and Mr. Sinister, still engaged in a fierce battle, turned their heads. A startling sight unfolded. The Mandarin's finger, once adorned with rings, was now bare. All 10 rings had vanished. Looking at the Mandarin again, he was squatting on the ground, picking up something. A closer look revealed the missing rings. Surprisingly, they appeared shattered. While they didn't understand what had happened, Emma and the others weren't about to miss this golden opportunity. With a quiet rebuke, they activated their telepathy, attempting to stop the Mandarin. At the same moment, a red energy ring emanated from Alex's body and landed in front of the Mandarin in the blink of an eye. Amidst the Mandarin's furious roar, the energy ring exploded, instantly blasting the surrounding ground. Dirt and grass flew up in a shower, and the glint of gemstones could be seen among them, the fragments of the 10 rings. "You all must die?" The Mandarin raised his head, his expression icy as he gazed at the approaching Emma and the others. His voice, like a voice from the depths of hell, froze their souls. In fact, at that moment, the surrounding space seemed frozen solid, with only the Mandarin able to move. Carefully gathering the ring fragments, the Mandarin rose to his feet, his aura soaring like a rocket, even more terrifying than the Mandarin himself with the 10 rings. Back when the Mandarin was still Zhang Tong, without the 10 rings, he had nearly defeated Alex with his Chinese magic. Alex ultimately defeated Zhang Tong, and the defeated Zhang Tong vanished, having in reality retreated into seclusion to cultivate. When Zhang Tong reappeared, he had become the Mandarin, bearing the 10 rings, which became his symbol. However, few noticed, or even knew, that after decades of seclusion, the Mandarin's magic had already reached the pinnacle of sorcery, rivaling even the 10 rings. Watching the Mandarin's renewed fury, Emma and the others hesitated for a moment, but instead of retreating, they sped up even further, reaching him in a flash. A burly blue figure swooped down. It was Beast Tank, lashing out with sharp claws, aiming for the Mandarin's neck. A solid grasp would have likely severed the Mandarin's neck. "Get out," the Mandarin shouted, a powerful surge erupting from his body, sending Beast Tank flying overhead, sending him flying over 10 meters before landing. Charles, who had just recovered his breath, felt a cold sweat break out on his smooth forehead. He turned to look at the sage beside him and whispered, "Students, are you all safe?" The Mandarin, even without the 10 commandments, was still so powerful, leaving Charles feeling powerless. He secretly resolved to train the X-Men once this matter was resolved. Mutant's potential shouldn't be this high. The sage nodded, glanced down at the clipboard in his hand, and frowned slightly. "From what I can see, the Mandarin just unleashed a spell. The energy fluctuations of the spell were very strange, and could be detected with even the slightest attention." "What are you trying to say?" Charles glanced at the demon-like Mandarin, his expression growing increasingly serious. The sage didn't answer immediately, but turned to look at Vivian Lee and the other 2 girls beside him. "They understand spells better than we do. Perhaps they have a solution. Magic and superpowers may appear to have the same effect, but they are 2 fundamentally different systems. Simply put, Superpowers are mostly due to physical mutations. While they are naturally gifted, their potential is often limited, and practice is extremely difficult. However, spells are different. With a teacher's guidance and long-term training, many ordinary people can achieve extraordinary powers. Of course, this is just a superficial explanation. A deeper understanding reveals that mutants rely entirely on talent, while mages rely on the environment. Powerful sorcerers can mobilize the forces of heaven and earth. While this may sound a bit fanciful, it's true. Take, for example, Shumagorath from the Chaos Dimension, who is invincible within his own dimension precisely because he can harness the power of his own dimension. Of course, no one present fully grasped this truth, not even Vivian and the other two, who had studied magic with Alex. But that didn't stop them from devising a way to deal with the Mandarin. Upon hearing the sage's words, the three women began to brainstorm. Spells require incantations or hand seals to be cast. We can try to interrupt or interfere, but this could cause the spell to backfire. Audrey spoke first. She had been deeply concerned when she first learned magic, and she immediately came up with a countermeasure. Charles immediately passed Audrey's idea to Emma and the others, but the feedback was that it was impossible to interrupt. The Mandarin's casting speed was simply too fast, and his movements were powerless to stop him. Telepathy and other methods were also ineffective. Don't attack the Mandarin. Focus on disrupting the energy around him. Vivian Lee was quick to react. Upon learning that Audrey's idea had failed, her eyes lit up as she suddenly came up with a new solution, though her tone was uncertain. It should work. Crystal should know what to do. Although somewhat confused, Charles relayed Vivian Lee's words. On the battlefield, Crystal was under considerable pressure. Her elemental manipulation had barely availed in the previous battle. From beginning to end, she hadn't even touched the Mandarin. Just as the Mandarin's 10 rings shattered and Crystal was about to unleash her might, the Mandarin erupted again, displaying formidable magical abilities. This once again suppressed Crystal's power. The Mandarin's control over the elements became even more dominant, so dominant that Crystal couldn't even control the 4 elements. Just as she was feeling depressed, she heard Charles' voice, and a sudden realization struck her. She didn't bother trying to seize elemental control, focusing solely on destruction, which was clearly much easier and more convenient. In a matter of moments, the elements of the entire space were thrown into chaos. Not only a trained magician like the Mandarin, but even a natural elemental master like Crystal couldn't control even a single element. Any slight attempt at control would trigger a chain reaction, ultimately causing the elements to riot and explode. Furious, yet helpless, the Mandarin retreated after a long stalemate. Before he could react, an unexpected figure appeared in the mysterious valley, in front of Academy X Mandarin. The slightly suspicious voice was none other than Alex. Despite all the hassles, they were still a step behind, and the perfect attendance was ruined. P.S. With so much to do at the end of the year, I can't help it. I'll try to update twice a day. I'll try to catch up on yesterday's overdue update today. Chapter 408 Threat. At Alex's voice, the Mandarin paused, turning to look at the suddenly appearing Alex. His expression instantly darkened. Alex, you finally dared to come out. While the Mandarin focused on Alex, Emma and the others ignored him, their attacks unwavering. Before Alex could even begin to address him, the Mandarin let out a scream, realizing the situation was unfavorable. Without a second thought, the Mandarin made a decisive move and fled. To avoid being caught by Alex, he even sacrificed his essence to perform a swift escape technique, vanishing in the blink of an eye. By the time Alex realized what was happening and tried to pursue the Mandarin, he had already lost sight of him. The Mandarin's escape was a clean one, but it left Mr. Sinister in a terrible lurch. Constantly entangled by Logan, Mr. Sinister had no chance of escaping. Sensing Alex's shifted gaze, Mr. Sinister broke out in a cold sweat, silently cursing the Mandarin and regretting that he shouldn't have followed the Mandarin to provoke the mutants. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as regret. Having come to this point, Mr. Sinister was resigned to his actions and simply stopped fighting, ignoring Logan's fierce attacks. Puzzled by the unexpected ease with which his claws pierced Mr. Sinister's chest, Logan looked up at Mr. Sinister and realized that he had lost interest in the fight. He sheathed his claws and stood aside, watching Mr. Sinister with a wary expression. "You're quite tactful." Alex glanced at Mr. Sinister and said nothing more. He turned to look at Charles and asked with a puzzled look on his face, "What's going on? Why are these two guys here?" "Blame me." Charles opened his mouth to explain, But Emma had already spoken. When you went to the Chaos Dimension, the Mandarin showed up. After a brief explanation, Emma turned to look at Mr. Sinister, pointed at the mutant bio-soldiers who were motionless beside her, and said seriously, Mr. Sinister has mastered the secret of the X gene. These people were created by him. They are undead bio-soldiers with mutant abilities. Oh, Alex looked at these mutant bio-soldiers curiously after hearing this, and his brows gradually frowned after a while. These are undead soldiers created by magic. Could these people be related to the Mandarin? The magic of the mutant bio-soldiers was a little beyond Alex's expectations. He thought they were the product of experiments like Deadpool, but he didn't expect that some necromancy was involved, which is a forbidden technique in the magic system. Mr. Sinister coughed lightly and began to explain. These people are all under the Mandarin's command. I've simply transformed them, that's all. Your transformation is truly remarkable, almost as good as Stryker's. Alex snorted, his face cold and murderous, his expression etched. You can't kill me. Sensing Alex's undisguised murderous intent, Mr. Sinister chuckled and spoke calmly, his face filled with conviction. Alex's eyes narrowed slightly, his murderous intent intensifying. In a deep voice, he asked, what if I absolutely must kill you, Apocalypse? Mr. Sinister remained composed, looking up at Alex and slowly uttering, without me, you'll never defeat Apocalypse. Apocalypse? I have my own way of dealing with him. Alex remained unmoved, walking towards Mr. Sinister step by step, like an executioner approaching an execution ground. Mr. Sinister was genuinely frightened, his body trembling slightly. He instinctively tried to flee, but he quickly recovered, forcing himself to steady himself. With faint composure, he asked, Apocalypse is immortal. He's like a curse. As long as mutants don't perish, he'll never die. What else do you know? Alex paused, looking at Mr. Sinister in disbelief. Alex didn't know much about Apocalypse. In their several encounters, Alex had only managed to defeat him, not kill him. Apocalypse possessed more mutant abilities than Alex could imagine, and he possessed similar abilities to almost all modern mutants. Furthermore, Apocalypse had once claimed to be the first mutant on Earth, leading one to suspect that he was the origin of mutantkind. Seeing that Alex had finally relented, Mr. Sinister breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't dare resort to any more tricks and spoke directly. Apocalypse is to mutants what Cain is to vampires. According to legend, Cain was the first vampire and the progenitor of the vampire race. Strictly speaking, all subsequent vampires were Cain's descendants. Vampires? There can't really be vampires in this world, right? Hollywood had recently been buzzing with vampires, and Monroe was quite interested. Hearing Mr. Sinister mention vampires, she subconsciously asked. Mr. Sinister smiled slightly, nodded slightly with feigned reserve, and then began to explain. Vampires do exist, but most of the time they hide in coffins and sleep. Even if they come out to move around, they are very secretive and few people know about them. Let's talk about vampires later. Alex interrupted Mr. Sinister with a stern face, and asked in a somewhat anxious tone, continue talking about Apocalypse, everything about him. Mr. Sinister shook his head slowly and said casually, there is no point in introducing more, it is better to talk about the solution directly. After a slight pause, Mr. Sinister turned his head to look around, and finally his gaze returned to Alex, with a confident smile on the corner of his mouth. I have a way to solve Apocalypse forever without hurting mutants. Alex lowered his head to think for a moment, turned to look at Emma, pointed at Mr. Sinister and said in a deep voice, take him away. After taking a breath, he added, lock him up and guard him strictly. Mr. Sinister hadn't expected such a result. He stared at Alex in astonishment, his eyes filled with disbelief. Though perplexed, Emma followed Alex's instructions to the letter. Immediately, someone rushed over, apprehended Mr. Sinister, and took him directly to prison. After casually incinerating the mutant bio-warriors' trash, Alex led them back to the academy, a frown on his face the entire way. Alex, don't worry too much. Vivian leaned over to Alex, soothing him in a low voice. Apocalypse has already been defeated by you. Even if he comes again, nothing will happen. Alex shook his head calmly, don't trust Mr. Sinister completely. Apocalypse isn't a problem right now, huh? Vivian stared at Alex in astonishment. The others around her had similar expressions. They all thought Alex was worried about Apocalypse. Compared to Apocalypse, the Mandarin is the biggest threat, Alex said worriedly with a bitter smile on his face. To be precise, it should be those mutant biochemical warriors. They are the biggest threat. I thought I would have some free time today, But I didn't expect to be so busy. I'll do the first update. And the second update will be in the early morning. I'll make up for it later. Chapter 409 Undead Warrior. Hearing Alex's words, Emma and others were confused. Didn't you kill all the mutant biochemical warriors? The mutant biochemical warriors are almost immortal, but under Alex's powerful flame energy, they were directly turned into ashes. Without a body, they naturally could not be resurrected. I just told you, they're not bio-warriors, they're undead warriors, Alex said solemnly, scanning the crowd. Their bodies are actually terracotta warriors, a special type of human figurine crafted from fired clay. They belong to the Qin Shi Huang Terracotta Army of China, hailed as the eighth wonder of the world. After briefly explaining the terracotta warriors, Alex sighed with regret and continued, the terracotta warriors were originally inanimate objects, but under certain necromancy spells, they can be revived and transformed into undead warriors. And then what? Logan pulled out a cigar from somewhere and held it between his lips, unlit. He tilted his head and looked at Alex, shaking his fist with a nonchalant expression. Even if they're transformed into mutant bio-warriors, I'll still take them down with one claw. Logan was confident that no matter how invulnerable the mutant bio-warriors were, they wouldn't be able to withstand his adamantium claws. Even if he couldn't destroy them invisibly like Alex, Logan could completely shatter them, giving them no chance to recover. Alex rolled his eyes, his expression growing increasingly bitter. Do you know how many terracotta army soldiers there are? Alex knew the Mandarin, and he knew he had always been incredibly ambitious. He'd probably already created this army of undead warriors long ago. Thousands and thousands, while others might not have understood, Charles did. He finally understood what Alex was worried about, and his face darkened. Thousands of undead warriors, if they were also gifted with mutant powers, would be a formidable force capable of changing the world, unparalleled. Quantitative change leads to qualitative change. Just now, a dozen mutant bio-warriors cornered an X-Men force twice their size. If there were tens of thousands of them, equipped with the right mutant powers, who in the world could stop them? With Charles's response, nearly everyone present suddenly realized what was happening, their faces changing, their expressions heavy. Logan, however, remained nonchalant, spreading his hands and looking at Alex with a puzzled expression. No problem. Humanity can wipe them all out with a single nuclear bomb. Alex was delighted at first. As humanity's most powerful weapon, a nuclear bomb's power was undeniable. A single detonation would have left the mutants with little chance of survival. Just as Alex was feeling elated, the image of the Mandarin suddenly flashed through his mind, and his face fell. Don't forget, behind this army of mutants, there's the Mandarin. Nuclear bombs were a real deterrent to ordinary psychics, but to superpowers like Alex and the Mandarin, they posed little threat. Not only could Alex swallow a nuclear bomb in one gulp, but the Mandarin also had several methods of disintegrating it. But this is also a way. As long as the Mandarin is restrained, the mutant bio-warriors can be solved in this way. Alex did not completely deny Logan's statement after all. We can imagine that the Mandarin will definitely pay attention to it and will probably find another way. Then should we inform humans? Sage said seriously. Holding the notebook in his hand, if the Mandarin really wants to rule the world, he will definitely take action against humans in secret. Alex pondered for a moment, shook his head and said, it's nonsense. Humans won't believe it even if I tell them. With the current relationship between humans and mutants, humans most likely won't believe mutants. After hesitating for a while, Alex added, we should notify Nick Fury. He will have an idea. What should we do now? Emma also spoke at this time, her voice a little weak. Take the initiative or wait and see? Take the initiative. Alex made the choice without thinking. The mutation should take some time. We must try to find him before the Mandarin appears again, and then destroy all the undead warriors. Yes, the 10 commandments are broken, and the Mandarin is no longer as powerful as before. Reed has not spoken since Alex appeared, especially when Alex talked about humans. He tried his best to hide his body. Now he finally jumped out to set an example for humans. It's time for us to seize the opportunity. Alex looked at Reed in disbelief when he heard this. The 10 commandments are broken? The Mandarin's 10 commandments. Alex still remembered the power of the 10 commandments, which could be called a cosmic-level artifact. It was a joke that such an artifact would be broken. Emma telepathically replicated the entire battle scene into Alex's mind, including the moment the 10 rings suddenly disintegrated amidst the Mandarin's might. After watching the battle, Alex finally understood that only the rings of the 10 rings had been damaged. temporarily depriving them of their power. The crucial gems within the rings were intact. With a skilled craftsman reforging the rings and resetting the gems, the 10 rings would be as good as new. However, Alex's concern wasn't the 10 rings themselves, but rather the person who had destroyed them. Who did this? The solution was simple: many could do it. The key was the thought. At least, Alex had fought the Mandarin so many times, and he had never considered destroying the rings. In fact, Alex wasn't the only one curious. Charles and the others were also baffled, wondering who had done it. It was me. Audrey slowly raised her hand, her face flushing. She explained hurriedly, a hint of pride in her eyes. I just wanted to give it a try. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. Charles, watching Audrey's excitement, suddenly realized that superpowers didn't have to be used in large-scale combat. They could be used strategically, just like how Audrey used shockwaves to quietly destroy the rings without alerting the Mandarin, ultimately shattering the 10 rings. Just as Charles's thoughts were growing more and more excited, his communicator suddenly chimed, carrying Nick Fury's furious roar. Charles, you mutants, what the hell do you want? Huh? What? Charles, stunned by Nick Fury's yell, asked in a daze, a somewhat nonsensical question. Alex, sensing something was amiss, snatched the communicator from Charles's escape position, and asked coldly, what happened, Nick? Alex? You're back. Nick Fury, on the other end of the communicator, was stunned at first when he heard Alex's voice, then shouted in surprise. Alex hummed a few times in response before asking again, what's going on, Nick? Several groups of mutants have appeared on the streets of New York, robbing banks and wreaking havoc. The humans are already protesting. Nick Fury suddenly regained consciousness and explained solemnly, if this isn't resolved quickly, I'm afraid humans will really go to war. Relations between humans and mutants were becoming increasingly strained. Countless secret exchanges of fire had taken place, but publicly both sides had remained relatively restrained, and the situation hadn't reached a critical juncture. However, if this matter remained unresolved, humans would undoubtedly seize upon it and declare war. As he spoke, several photos appeared on the communicator, all of which showed scenes from the incident. Alex immediately recognized the mutants responsible and growled, gritting his teeth, they're not mutants, they're undead warriors. Undead warriors? What the hell? Nick Fury was stunned, his face filled with confusion. I've been procrastinating until now and I really can't stand it anymore. Chapter 410, Central Plains Dragon Valley. These people are all undead warriors created by the Mandarin using magic, and then transformed by Mr. Sinister to possess mutant abilities, Alex explained with gritted teeth and a low growl on his face, an expression of great anger. The Mandarin escaped from me not long ago. On the other side of the communicator, Nick Fury was completely confused. He rubbed his brow and pondered for a long time before speaking in a tone of you decide what to do. Okay, you decide what to do. Loosening the tie around his neck, Nick Fury thought for a moment and added, full of complaints, our people can't do anything about them. It's all up to you, don't worry, I'll take care of this. Alex nodded angrily and agreed, even if you don't look for us, we will look for the Mandarin. I will explain the whole thing to the humans, don't worry. Nick Fury thanked him and replied in a deep voice. Just as he was about to hang up the phone, he suddenly remembered something and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. By the way, I forgot to mention that our people found some very interesting things in the Arctic. Alex was preoccupied with the Mandarin's question when Nick Fury's words suddenly struck him. He was stunned for a moment before reacting. All thoughts vanished, leaving only a single, upright figure. Steve. Is there any news on Steve? At this point in the Arctic, Alex's only thought was of Captain America, Steve Rogers, who had been missing for 70 years. Not sure yet, only 30% sure, Nick Fury said cautiously, not completely. I'll wait for your good news. Alex wanted to find Steve immediately, but compared to Captain America's eventual appearance, the Mandarin's current situation was far more pressing and daunting. Suppressing his excitement, Alex returned his thoughts to the Mandarin, his brow furrowed in confusion. What's the Mandarin up to instead of hiding? Less than an hour had passed, and the Mandarin's impatience to stir up trouble was truly unexpected. I think the Mandarin is trying to distract us. Charles pondered for a moment, then looked up at Alex and said seriously, it seems the Mandarin is definitely planning something. We must find him as soon as possible. 5 days passed in a flash. During these 5 days, attacks by undead warriors occurred all over the United States, and the X-Men were forced to fight fires everywhere, exhausted. But there was still no news of the Mandarin. Forget it, let's wait for him to come out. Alex looked at the X-Men around him, who were obviously exhausted, smiled bitterly and shook his head, giving up the idea of searching for the Mandarin. 10 more days passed unnoticed. The attacks by undead warriors had completely ceased 7 days ago. 7 days of inactivity had almost made Alex believe that the Mandarin had truly gone into hiding. Just when Alex was wondering whether to return to space to continue the unfinished asteroid construction or stay on Earth to wait for the Mandarin suddenly appeared. The Mandarin has appeared, Alex, Sage Hurriedon, a hint of panic on his usually expressionless face. Alex looked at Xian's in confusion, a bit surprised. Just show up. Look how panicked you are. No, Alex, Xian's gasped, and without caring about the others' gazes, he leaped over to Alex, handed him his tablet, and casually clicked on a photo. Look, here. Alex couldn't believe his eyes. He was stunned for a long moment before he exclaimed. Is that a dragon, with a body resembling a long snake, a unicorn's head, a carp's tail, a face covered in long whiskers, deer-like horns, and 5 claws? It was clearly the legendary Azure Dragon. And Mandarin, clad in his signature green robes, stood tall atop the Azure Dragon's head, looking down with disdain. What shocked Alex even more was that there wasn't just one Azure Dragon in the photo, there were more than a dozen similarly shaped dragons roaming in the background, a breathtaking sight. I looked it up. This place is called Hangidong Dragon Valley. Legend has it that there is a dragon living there, although it was the first time Xian saw a Chinese dragon. She also knew many legends about it, so she was so panicked. After calming down, she continued to explain, this photo was sent by the Mandarin. He took the initiative to challenge you. Challenge? Alex looked at the Mandarin in the photo with some laughter and tears. What does he want to do? The winner is the king of the earth. Xian's laughed when she thought of what the Mandarin said. Alex shrugged, pointed at the photo, and said, the fight is here, in the Central Plains Dragon Valley. Xian's nodded. Yes, it's here. He told you to go alone, Alex, you can't go. As Xian's finished his words, Emma couldn't help but jump out, her face filled with worry. The Mandarin will definitely have an ambush. You'll be in danger. Alex shook his head nonchalantly, a confident expression on his face. Don't worry, the Mandarin is no match for me, he smiled faintly. Whatever ambush he has, it won't work on me. The Mandarin is certainly no match for you. But Emma started to try to dissuade Alex, but was interrupted. Trust me, Emma. Alex smiled at Emma, his eyes sparkling like stars, full of confidence. I'll be back soon. With that, Alex activated teleportation and vanished, arriving directly at the Central Plains Dragon Valley in the photo. Unrelated sentence fragment, no mistake, one song, one post, one content, 1/6, one book, one forum, one look. However, Alex didn't appear within the Dragon Valley, but rather outside it. During the teleportation, Alex felt a repulsive force, knocking him out of his spiritual world. Gazing at the nearby Hangidong Dragon Valley, Alex's relaxed expression suddenly turned serious. The Hangidong Dragon Valley was indeed not a benign place. It was enclosed by a mysterious formation and perpetually shrouded in mist, making it impossible for ordinary people to enter, or even see a single ray of light. Interesting. After observing the Dragon Valley for a while, and confirming that the confinement formation posed no other threat, Alex breathed a sigh of relief, chuckling softly as he stepped into the valley. While ordinary people couldn't enter the Dragon Valley, Alex was no ordinary person. Furthermore, having studied Chinese magic and had some familiarity with Chinese formations, breaking through the formation and entering the valley was a piece of cake. In a matter of seconds, Alex had safely entered the Dragon Valley. His gaze was filled with soaring dragons, looming in the mist and clouds, occasionally emitting deafening roars. Being Chinese after all, Alex had a special feeling towards the Chinese dragon. Looking at the dragon in the sky, his whole body trembled uncontrollably, and he was so excited that he couldn't help but exclaimed. It's worthy of being the Dragon Valley of the Central Plains. I took the time to add another chapter, so everyone can just read it, and I'll make it up after the new year. Chapter 411, Battle of Dragon Valley, 1. Alex, you're finally here. Alex's words had barely escaped him when a massive blue dragon, over 100 meters long, soared from the valley and, in the blink of an eye, reached Alex. Atop its ferocious, savage head stood a figure, none other than the Mandarin. Alex, alert and focused, shifted his gaze from the Mandarin to the blue dragon, secretly activating his telepathy, attempting to probe its memories. Alex knew the blue dragon as a mythical beast of boundless power, feared by demons and evildoers. How could he possibly be enslaved by the Mandarin? Unfortunately, Alex's telepathy was unsuccessful. The Mandarin seemed well prepared, and his telepathy was unable to detect the dragon's thoughts. "You're quite cunning, Mandarin," Alex snorted, his gaze returning to the Mandarin, a hint of anger etched across his brow. The Mandarin snorted coldly and pointed at Alex. The clouds and mist suddenly surged violently, and dozens of Chinese dragons flew out from them, their eyes, as big as copper bells, glowing blood red, as they stared at Alex intently. Before Alex could react, the dragons had surrounded him. "Mandarin, what do you mean?" Alex peered beyond the dragons' massive bodies, his expression impassive. Despite their terrifying ferocity and overwhelming power, these dragons were nothing to Alex. The Mandarin chuckled and shook his head, but remained silent. Alex frowned slowly and was about to speak when a ball of fire erupted from one of the dragons, blazing white flames blazing through the air. The fire seemed to have lit a fuse, and a bolt of lightning streaked through the air, instantly striking Alex's forehead. The momentary paralysis left Alex's mind reeling, and he could barely control his body. "What's going on?" Alex was horrified. The lightning had appeared unexpectedly, but with the energy absorption, there shouldn't have been any problems, and he certainly wouldn't have been paralyzed to the point of losing control of his body. Just as he was thinking, a new attack arrived. The emerald dragon suddenly thrust its head forward, its maw slightly opened, and a thick, dark green mist, mingled with a dizzying odor, erupted. "Poison!" Alex was startled, immediately holding his breath and casting several layers of energy shields around himself to block out the dark green poison. Ever since being poisoned by the Black Queen, Alex had always harbored a fear of poison, even though his body had completely changed. But what astonished Alex was the toxic mist actually traveling through the flames, even penetrating several layers of energy shields, slowly invading Alex. Alex instinctively blew a breath, transforming it into a gust of wind that swept towards the poisonous mist, attempting to disperse it. The unbelievable scene unfolded again. The poisonous fog, like a mountain, stood still beneath a raging wind, drifting unabated towards Alex. "Is this true?" Alex's forehead began to sweat. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration struck him, and he remembered something Charles had said earlier. "Is this all an illusion?" The power of the 10 Commandments. Alex's mind instantly cleared. He looked up again. He was still surrounded by dragons, but there was no direct approaching poisonous fog, nor was there a sky of flames. "How do you feel?" Alex had just regained consciousness when the Mandarin's voice reached him, his tone calm and full of playfulness. "Interesting," Alex snorted, his guard raised. Illusions are essentially a form of psychic power, relying on the caster's powerful psychic power to interfere with the recipient's mind, creating all sorts of bizarre illusions. The fact that Alex, with his immense psychic power, was still affected by the Mandarin's illusions demonstrates the terrifying nature of his psychic abilities. Alex, reflecting on this, remained impassive. Turning to gaze at the surrounding dragons, he said with disdain, "Such a prime opportunity, and you didn't attack." After a brief pause, Alex continued, "There won't be another opportunity like this again." As soon as he finished speaking, Alex vanished from the dragon's encirclement. The Mandarin, perched atop the azure dragon, remained motionless. Countless lightning flashed inexplicably around him, transforming into a lightning storm covering hundreds of meters, like a dancing silver dragon. Countless dragons howled in pain and retreated beneath the storm, leaving only the azure dragon unharmed. The lightning storm lasted for nearly 3 minutes, and the once confident Mandarin's expression gradually darkened. He surveyed his surroundings expressionlessly, his brow furrowed. The lightning storm was clearly intended for Alex, but from beginning to end, aside from the affected dragons, not even a trace of Alex was visible. Did he leave? The Mandarin, still unable to sense Alex's presence, was startled, a grotesque thought forming in his mind. In reality, Alex hadn't left. He was right behind the Mandarin, transformed into a thin layer of skin, carefully clinging to the azure dragon's massive form. He was observing the Mandarin, yet he hesitated to strike. Alex, unwilling to leave any further trouble for the Mandarin, was determined to kill him this time, no matter what. However, achieving this was difficult, so Alex had to bide his time. Atop the azure dragon's head, the Mandarin's frown deepened as Alex remained silent, but his expression remained unrelenting. He shouted provocatively, "Alex, are you just going to be a coward?" The Mandarin's words went in one ear and out the other, completely irritating Alex. After waiting a while longer, and seeing the Mandarin's patience fading, Alex grew excited. This was the most likely opportunity to kill the Mandarin, and his tense nerves relaxed a little. Just look at the 6-9 book forum. However, at that moment, a flash of yellow light suddenly appeared, striking Alex's forehead. Alex had no time to react, only managing to twist his transformed body to avoid the yellow light. His head dodged, but Alex's entire body was pierced by the yellow light, its thin flesh instantly splitting in two. Discovered, feeling his body split in two, Alex remained unfazed. The half of his body that retained consciousness quickly reverted to human form, then reached out and pulled the other half back, instantly merging it into his own body. In a flash, Alex returned to normal, though his face paled slightly. "You're quite resilient. This didn't kill you." The Mandarin, realizing his fatal blow had missed, flashed a flicker of surprise, then quickly returned to normal, taunting Alex. "I underestimated you. From now on, I will take this seriously." Alex ignored the Mandarin's words, squinted his eyes and looked at the Mandarin, and said seriously, "Come on, let's have a real fight." During the Chinese New Year, the update cannot be maintained normally. I hope you can forgive me. I will make up for it after the new year. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412 New Year's Blessings. I almost forgot to wish you all a happy new year. I wish you all good health, good luck, and all your wishes come true in the year of the monkey. May you all be as awesome as ever in the year of the monkey. Chapter 413, Battle of Dragon Valley, 2. As he spoke, Alex's gaze involuntarily locked onto the Mandarin's neck. The deadly slashing beam had emanated from there, presumably, the Mandarin had worn the shattered 10 rings there. Very well, let's see how it goes, the Mandarin shouted softly, his green robes fluttering in the wind, emitting a deafening shriek, several times more ferocious than a dragon's roar. Alex's eyebrows raised at this, and he looked at the Mandarin in surprise, unable to resist praising him. It's been years since I last saw you. Your skills have indeed improved considerably. The Mandarin glanced at Alex, a look of pride on his face, but he remained silent. But in the blink of an eye, with a sharp shout from the Mandarin, the piercing shriek ceased abruptly. A stream of invisible energy shot out from the Mandarin's outstretched palms, hurtling towards Alex at such speed that it seemed to tear apart space in its path. Sonic attack. Alex's sensitivity to energy was acute. Feeling the vibrations in the air, black bolts and phasonic attack immediately popped into his mind. Energy absorption is a remarkable ability, capable of absorbing nearly every form of energy, including thermal, nuclear, and kinetic energy. The only difference lies in the efficiency of absorption. Kinetic energy is the most difficult of all energy forms to absorb. Pure energy like flames are far more efficient than kinetic energy. Sound waves, however, are a unique form of kinetic energy, even more difficult to absorb than a rapidly moving bullet. This is because sound waves are vibrating energy and are typically continuous. Furthermore, due to their inherent properties, sound can be highly disruptive, especially when containing powerful energy, which can severely affect both the physical and mental well-being. While Alex easily defeated Black Bolt in his previous battle, facing Black Bolt's devastating infrasonic waves was no easy task. Of course, the Mandarin's sonic attack was certainly inferior to Black Bolt's, but it was not to be underestimated. Alex's first instinct was to resist, to hold out for the duration of the sonic wave, just as he had done when facing Black Bolt. But at that moment, a brilliant idea suddenly struck Alex. Alex immediately put it into action, and in an instant, his entire body expanded like a balloon, a gaping hole forming in his chest, facing the Mandarin. Just then, a devastating sonic wave struck him. A miraculous event occurred. The invisible sonic wave plunged directly into the gap, not exploding as the Mandarin had expected. What's going on? The Mandarin wondered, but remembering Alex's miraculous power, he chose not to stop, instead continuing to release sonic waves. Meanwhile, due to his body's infinite expansion and the increased surface area, absorption was much more efficient, so the sonic wave had no significant effect on Alex. After the initial shock, It quickly stabilized, and then his entire body began to rhythmically move at an imperceptible frequency, gradually absorbing the incoming sonic energy. Time ticked by, and 5 minutes later, the Mandarin finally reacted. Go ahead, go ahead. Let's see how much you can absorb. A sneer crossed the Mandarin's lips. He didn't give up, but continued to intensify his sonic surges. With Dragon Valley as his backup, the Mandarin had no fear of running out of energy. The secrets of Dragon Valley were unknown, and the Mandarin was the only one who knew everything. His 10 rings came from the Dragon Valley. In the Dragon Valley, with the 10 rings in hand, the Mandarin was the supreme god, unrivaled. Alex initially expected the Mandarin to be enraged, but when he turned, he saw that he wasn't angry. Instead, he wore a strange smile, as if waiting for something. Is there some conspiracy? Alex's heart skipped a beat, and he became nervous. The Mandarin's ingenuity was not to be underestimated. Alex pondered for a long time, but he couldn't find any way the Mandarin could pose a threat. Over half an hour passed unnoticed. Alex and the Mandarin locked in a stalemate, one continuously releasing sonic shockwaves while the other absorbed them relentlessly. Even after half an hour of continuous absorption, Alex's body was still far from reaching its limit, yet his expression was grim and a touch of anxiety. What on earth? Alex's irritation grew with each passing moment, the Mandarin's composure unsettling him. 10 minutes later, Alex's patience was strained once again, and he decided to strike back. A spherical red energy wave gradually formed before him. Fearing any anomalies in the sonic shockwaves, Alex didn't absorb any of them, instead absorbing them completely. This immense energy wave, packed with such power, shattered the Mandarin's sonic shockwaves with overwhelming force, hurtling towards him with lightning speed. A trifle, the Mandarin snorted coldly at this. His chest suddenly lit up, and a hidden gravitational field appeared around him. Strangely, the entire field vibrated at a mysterious frequency. As the spherical energy wave reached the Mandarin, the vibrations of the gravitational field suddenly accelerated. Then, to Alex's astonishment, the spherical energy wave actually flew back, several times faster than before. After a moment's pause, Alex quickly recovered and dodged the rebounding spherical energy wave, allowing it to crash into the mountain wall behind him. His eyes fixed on the Mandarin, filled with amazement. Alex was generally familiar with the abilities of the 10 Commandments and had seen energy waves bounce back like this before, but never with the ease the Mandarin had just displayed, nor was it possible to achieve a complete rebound. Even Alex didn't dare to challenge such a massive energy source and could only dodge. At that moment, Alex's mind raced. After a moment, it dawned on him, could this be related to Dragon Valley? Otherwise, why would the Mandarin choose this place for the final battle? At this thought, Alex's expression grew even more serious. The Mandarin's actions clearly showed his absolute confidence. What exactly is this Dragon Valley? Alex put aside his worries and turned to look at the Mandarin, who remained motionless, his face thick with curiosity. The Mandarin chuckled without explanation, and several rays of light shone from his chest. With a flash of light, the death storm that had appeared before Academy X reappeared in the sky, even more powerful in both size and imbued with power. The entire Dragon Valley was enveloped in this apocalyptic atmosphere. Hundreds of dragons seemed to have lost their divine power, their bodies frozen and falling from space. The trees within the Dragon Valley, and indeed the entire space, became stagnant, with not even a breeze. Alex stared at everything in front of him in amazement, his heart gradually sinking to the bottom. Spring Festival, all about eating, even belly fat. Chapter 414, Battle of Dragon Valley, 3. While Alex didn't lose control like the dragons, he was feeling terribly ill. His entire body felt as if it were mired in a quagmire, severely restricting his movements. Even his telepathic transmission was hampered. While not completely ineffective, it was fraught with danger. Meanwhile, the death storm slowly approached. A blend of lightning, fire, and ice, the death storm was incredibly violent. Even before it reached Alex, he felt a profound threat. Unable to wait for the death storm to approach, Alex began to exert energy control from a distance, attempting to reduce its intensity. Unfortunately, the death storm was like a wild horse running wild, completely uncontrollable. Unable to control it, Alex immediately attacked, countering attack with attack. An energy shockwave as thick as a bucket collided with the death storm in the blink of an eye. The expected collapse didn't occur. The death storm merely trembled slightly, then, like an ancient beast, opened its mouth and swallowed a shockwave, intensifying even further. Seeing this, Alex sighed bitterly. Against such a fierce death storm, no defense could withstand it. Alex wasted no effort on defense, concentrating on conditioning his body, improving his energy absorption while simultaneously strengthening his physical conditioning and increasing his resistance. As Alex prepared a new countermeasure, the death storm approached. Alex struggled to steady himself, but to no avail. He spun involuntarily, and in an instant, he was swept up by the death storm, vanishing in the blink of an eye. In Dragon Valley, the Mandarin landed in the canopy of a towering tree. He gazed upon the death storm that had engulfed Alex, his lips curled in triumph. "Alex, you're doomed this time." As he spoke, the Mandarin's chest lit up again, and several beams of light shot directly into the death storm, the cutting beams being particularly prominent. Within the death storm, Alex struggled to steady himself, preventing himself from becoming disoriented and upside down, but his body continued to spin rapidly with the death storm. Alex was in a state of extreme distress, his clothing ripped and covered in wounds. If it weren't for his exceptional health and the protective elixir, he would have been slashed to pieces by the death storm. Just as Alex was furious, a cutting beam approached from afar. Sensing the threat, Alex's expression changed again. Alex could only fend for himself now. His only remaining hope of escaping this predicament was teleportation. The death storm had frozen the entire Dragon Valley, blocking all special capabilities and severely limiting his teleportation. Fortunately, he could still use it, but the drain on his psychic energy was immense and dangerous. Teleportation couldn't lock onto space, so blindly teleporting could easily lead to problems. But at this point, Alex was running out of options. Fortunately, Alex's teleportation was successfully reaching behind the Mandarin and landing directly on the ground, amidst the lush forest. The closer they got to the ground, the less impact the death storm had. Alex immediately recovered his body, getting back into top form. He looked up at the pursuing Mandarin and the death storm. "Why did you run away, Alex?" The Mandarin hovered in midair, looking down at Alex, his old face etched with undisguised mockery. As the Mandarin jeered, the death storm, under his control, shrank several times smaller and barreled towards Alex, nearly wiping out the entire forest. Alex ignored the Mandarin, his face heavy with worry as he watched the death storm, now several times faster and much smaller, grow in size. The threat posed by the death storm was beyond imagination, and even more terrifying, it was constantly growing. With each passing moment, it would only grow stronger, eventually spiraling out of control. Alex's frown deepened as he watched the death storm grow stronger, and he finally made a decision. "I hope the black hole can stop it," Alex muttered, transforming into a black hole, nearly 100 meters across, and flew towards the death storm. Transforming into a black hole was Alex's ultimate move, having been used against Thanos in Apocalypse, and it seemed perfectly suited to the Mandarin. The power of the black hole was indeed not to be underestimated. Its powerful gravitational field shook the entire Dragon Valley upon its appearance, and the stagnant space seemed to spin, with everything rushing towards the black hole. Deathstorm bore the brunt of the impact, having a small portion of its body immediately torn away by the black hole. The remaining portion was only saved thanks to the Mandarin's timely gravitational field. However, Deathstorm's size was so immense that even with the aid of the gravitational field, it was difficult for it to escape the black hole's engulfment. For a moment, the situation became a standoff, just as it had been at the beginning. The only difference was that Alex's transformation into a black hole had no limits, making it extremely difficult for the Mandarin to blast Alex with his energy. The standoff didn't last long. Within 2 minutes, the Mandarin voluntarily abandoned the Deathstorm. Without the Mandarin's control, the Deathstorm collapsed instantly, a massive explosion of energy erupting. Alex's black hole trembled violently, nearly disintegrating. A small portion of the Deathstorm's explosive energy was absorbed by Alex's black hole, but the majority dissipated throughout Dragon Valley, razing it to the ground. This scene clearly exceeded the Mandarin's expectations, as evidenced by his stunned expression. By the time the Mandarin realized something was wrong and tried to regain control of the Deathstorm, it was too late. He could only watch helplessly as it raged. After the initial wave of impact, Alex was forced to revert from his black hole form to his true form. His face was as pale as snow, his brow furrowed, and a solemn expression filled his expression. The impact of the explosion was unimaginable, and Alex could no longer maintain his black hole form. But to Alex's surprise, there was no sign of the Mandarin nearby. A quick glance revealed him standing beside a strange, turquoise-colored building, struggling to withstand the impact of the explosion. After scrutinizing the structure for a moment, Alex suddenly had an epiphany and exclaimed in amazement, "Is this a spaceship?" An alien spaceship. The turquoise-colored building was mostly buried beneath the ground, with only one sharp corner sticking out, like a bamboo shoot sticking out of the ground at an angle. Alex recognized it as a spaceship because of the characters painted on this protruding corner, which had distinctly alien characteristics. I'll finish one chapter today, and I'll try to resume updating tomorrow. Chapter 415, Battle of Dragon Valley, 4. An alien spaceship appeared in the magical Dragon Valley, its significance clear. Alex's lips curled up as he watched the Mandarin diligently protect the ship, a smile finally breaking loose on his tense face. "Mandarin, is this your reliance?" Alex sauntered towards the Mandarin, teasing as he walked, his gaze constantly surveying the ship, a hint of wonder in the depths of his eyes. The Mandarin had finally weathered the blast, but before he could let go of the weight of the shockwave, he suddenly heard Alex's voice. He shuddered, spun around, and looked up at Alex, his face wary. "Alex, don't worry, don't worry," he waved his hand, signaling the Mandarin to relax. Standing 50 meters from the ship, his gaze fixed on it, and he asked curiously, "Did you get those 10 rings from this ship, too?" The power of the 10 rings was unparalleled, and they couldn't possibly have been created on Earth. Alex had been trying to figure it out, but the sight of the spaceship instantly dawned on him. The 10 rings were indeed the product of an advanced alien civilization. The Mandarin wasn't about to let Alex's words down. The ring on his chest glowed faintly. "Alex, this battle is over. Leave this place immediately, or what?" Alex interrupted before the Mandarin could finish, his face full of mockery. "Just now I was wondering, no matter how powerful the ring is, there shouldn't be no limit. Now I understand. It's all because of this spaceship." The Mandarin, overcome with emotion, forgot to conceal his feelings and directly tapped into the spaceship's energy through his ring. Alex immediately noticed. "Alex, don't go too far." The Mandarin's face changed drastically, but his expression was a bit vain, and the glow on his chest grew stronger. The Mandarin had chosen the Dragon Valley as the battlefield because of this spaceship. Because the 10 rings were the spaceship's controllers, near it, the Mandarin could call upon even greater power. The ship's enormous size made it vulnerable to attack, so the Mandarin had concealed it early on, even concealing his deployment. But now, the ship was exposed. Knowing Alex's abilities, the Mandarin knew he couldn't possibly defend the ship from Alex's attack, hence his alarm. Alex chuckled and, instead of retreating, advanced, slowly moving toward the Mandarin, 10 steel balls slowly swirling around him. "Go to hell." Seeing the 10 steel balls, the Mandarin knew he had no escape and roared fiercely, his face etched with rage. As the Mandarin roared, the ground began to shake violently, and the massive ship broke through the ground and slowly rose. Before Alex could react, a white laser, as thick as an arm, suddenly ignited from the sharp corner of the ship. With lightning speed, it pierced Alex's chest, leaving a hole the size of a bowl. Alex slowly lowered his head, staring at the hole in his chest with a look of disbelief on his face. His mouth opened, he muttered, unable to utter a single word. The white laser's speed had surpassed the limit, practically teleporting. It flew right in front of Alex the moment it was fired, leaving him no time to defend himself. The Mandarin, also using the ship's white laser for the first time, was stunned for a long moment when he saw it had dealt a severe blow to Alex. He then pointed a finger at Alex and shouted mockingly, "Alex, I never thought you'd end up like this." Despite his mockery, the Mandarin didn't let up. He was no traditional villain. Giving no quarter. He immediately mobilized the world to mobilize the ship to fire another white laser, aiming to finish Alex off in one fell swoop. However, to the Mandarin's dismay, the white laser needed time to cool down and recharge. Furthermore, he discovered that a single shot of the white laser had consumed nearly 20% of the ship's energy. It's worth noting that this ship has been secretly absorbing Earth's energy since landing on Earth. The accumulated energy over thousands of years is immense, otherwise the Mandarin wouldn't have dared to confront Alex head-on. With such a vast energy reserve, a single white laser depleted 20% of it, leaving the Mandarin practically heartbroken. However, thinking of Alex's plight, and being able to injure Alex with a single blow, despite his energy-absorbing shield, the Mandarin suddenly felt proud. His thoughts raced, and the Mandarin turned to Alex, noting that Alex seemed to have barely recovered from the blow. Without a second thought, he attacked, blasting Alex with a barrage of cutting beams and other rays. Alex's current appearance was terrifying, his chest pierced, his heart gone. Even Wolverine, with his immense healing powers, would have taken time to recover. But for Alex, it was nothing more than a minor blow, unable to injure him at all. Alex's daze was primarily due to the psychological trauma, not so much shock, but rather shock. Aside from teleportation, energy absorption has always been Alex's most reliant ability. Energy absorption provides him with near-invincible protection, allowing him to fight without fear. Even Alex's current ultimate move, transforming into a black hole, is an evolution of energy absorption. But that white laser just now taught Alex a lesson: energy absorption isn't invincible. That flash of white was dazzling, the piercing pain was excruciating, and his mind was bewildered. Then came shock. Such a powerful force could exist in the world. Shocked, Alex's arrogance, fueled by his victory over Thanos and the Lord of Chaos, vanished, leaving only one thought: there's always a mountain higher than the other, and the road to power knows no bounds. No mistakes, no. Alex seemed to have fallen into Buddhist enlightenment. His mind was clear and bright, and his psychic power, which had long stagnated, gushed forth like a long-dried spring, rapidly increasing. However, at this crucial moment, the Mandarin attacked, and Alex's clarity of mind was suddenly blocked. He immediately broke free from his enlightenment, and the spring of energy vanished, leaving no more clear water. Alex was filled with hatred. He stared at the Mandarin, his eyes nearly blazing with fire, wishing to devour him alive. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity had been destroyed by the Mandarin, and it was the psychic power that Alex valued most. At that moment, Alex's hatred for the Mandarin practically materialized, soaring into the sky. "Mandarin, you will die today!" With a roar, Alex charged at the Mandarin with lightning speed. Alex nimbly dodged the incoming cutting beams and other rays. Even when the Mandarin tried to control them, it was too late because Alex had already rushed in front of him. Here's the first update, with one more chapter to go. More updates will come later. Chapter 416, Battle of Dragon Valley, 5. A straight punch landed crisply on the Mandarin's left cheek. The Mandarin's head tilted, and then his whole body flew out at an angle. Just after flying half a meter, another fist hit him, this time at the waist. The Mandarin's body, with the waist as the node, was bent into a standard U shape. When the first punch was thrown, the Mandarin was stunned. When the second punch was thrown, the Mandarin finally came to his senses. Without giving Alex a chance to punch again, the Mandarin's chest lit up again, and a huge shock force burst out from his heart. The powerful thrust pushed Alex out. Halfway through the flight, Alex regained his balance and looked back. The Mandarin had come to his senses and was looking at him with a serious look. "Mandarin, you will die today," Alex shouted again, and without engaging in close combat, 10 steel balls cut through the void, making a huge sonic boom, and flew straight towards the Mandarin. Following the steel ball magnetic cannon, an energy blast followed. Not just one, but a dense web of energy beams, each only the thickness of an index finger and a vibrant crimson. Such a dense blast of energy could tear the Mandarin into sieve in a matter of minutes. The Mandarin's expression changed slightly, but he showed no sign of panic. A dazzling light shone from his chest. The massive spaceship behind him shook violently, and a pure golden shield suddenly appeared, enveloping the Mandarin. Shield, Alex frowned, tentatively attempting to use energy control to disintegrate it. But to Alex's surprise, the shield was incredibly tight, as if it were a single, integrated whole. Energy control couldn't even affect it, and even a slight effort only managed to shake it. Watching the steel ball magnetic cannon strike the shield, creating only ripples, Alex's expression darkened. He gazed intently at the ship behind the Mandarin, exclaiming in heartfelt admiration, "As powerful as the white laser just now. Unbelievably powerful." Following the steel ball magnetic cannon, a dense energy blast also struck the shield. Unexpectedly, the energy beam didn't create a single ripple. Instead, it seemed to melt into the shield, as if being devoured. "It can even absorb?" Alex stared at the shield in astonishment, then turned his gaze once more to the ship, astonished. What alien civilization could possess such power? The Mandarin was once again amazed by the ship's capabilities. Its power was beyond his wildest dreams. Although he had discovered the ship decades earlier, aside from obtaining the 10 rings, he had devoted most of his time to training and mastering them, rarely studying it. These two surprises intensified the Mandarin's appreciation for the ship, and he resolved to study it thoroughly once he had dismissed Alex. Of course, Alex wouldn't give the Mandarin a chance, and he was determined to capture the spaceship. Abandoning energy attacks, Alex focused on unleashing the might of his steel ball railgun. The ripples, though small, at least registered some reaction. As Alex increased the power of his railgun, the shield's fluctuations grew, and the Mandarin within grew increasingly anxious. The shield blocked all of Alex's attacks, hindering them as well. Trying to disarm the shield proved daunting, and he could only watch helplessly as Alex continued his attacks. Finally, under Alex's relentless assaults, the shield finally vanished. A flash of white light flashed as it vanished. White laser. The instant the light vanished, Alex's mind immediately flashed back to the white laser, and his body reacted accordingly. Unfortunately, he was a little too slow, and the laser grazed his right ear, severing half of it. That was a close call. The elixir instantly restored his ear, and Alex couldn't help but pat his chest, sweat breaking out on his forehead. The white laser was clearly aimed at Alex's head. If Alex hadn't reacted quickly, his entire head would have been obliterated by the white laser. Alex could still survive without his heart, but without his head, there was no way he could survive. The white laser's ineffectiveness left the Mandarin feeling the most disappointed. This was his long-planned counterattack. But now that it had come to this, the Mandarin could only sigh, helpless. Alex secretly rejoiced, but he remained cautious. Who knew if the white laser would appear again? For a moment, the situation on the field seemed strange. The two men stood facing each other, neither making a move. Alex, fearful, was fully prepared for the white laser's arrival at any moment, while the Mandarin was biding his time, preparing for another attack. After a brief stalemate, Alex suddenly realized that the longer they dragged on, the worse it would be for him. With this thought, Alex's gaze involuntarily fell on the spaceship. In his previous attacks, Alex hadn't targeted it, but now he had no choice but to attack it. Noticing Alex's gaze, the Mandarin immediately tensed. Against Alex's full-throttle assault, he had no confidence in defending the ship. As he'd predicted, the moment Alex unleashed his magnetic field, the massive ship began to tremble violently, as if an invisible hand were tearing at it, attempting to rip it apart. The crackling of metal ripping apart struck the Mandarin like a series of blows. "Watch me, Alex," the Mandarin roared fiercely. His chest shone brightly, the 10 rings illuminating. Amidst the dazzling light, a purple beam shot rapidly towards Alex. The purple beam should be Shockwave. But this purple beam felt different to Alex. It didn't seem to be Shockwave. Cautiously, Alex didn't dare to take the attack head-on, and instead dodged. The purple beam finally missed Alex, passing over him and landing on the lower half of a wooden stake behind him. With a flash of purple light, the dark brown stake instantly petrified, transforming into a grayish-white stone. Petrification ray, Alex spat out, stunned. Before he could comprehend the meaning of this petrification ray, the ground shook again. Turning around, he saw the alien spaceship moving. "Shit, running," Alex roared, unleashing his magnetic field in an attempt to control the spaceship. However, the spaceship had already launched and vanished from its original position in a flash of thin air. Alex's magnetic field caught nothing. "Shit," Alex cursed under his breath, his face filled with frustration. The spaceship had teleported away, and Alex had no direction to follow it. He had no way to lock onto the target of the spaceship's teleportation. Meanwhile, the Mandarin breathed a sigh of relief. The moment Alex came to his senses, his heart was about to burst. He was genuinely worried that Alex would stop the ship, but thankfully, it finally left. The ship vanished, and while the Mandarin had lost his support, at least he didn't have to worry about losing it forever. With the 10 rings in hand, the Mandarin could always find the ship. After a moment of frustration, Alex finally came to his senses. He turned to the Mandarin and asked threateningly, "Mandarin, you have a way to find the ship, don't you?" After a few days of rest, his hands were even more damaged. Chapter 417, Battle of Dragon Valley, 6. "So what?" The Mandarin instinctively covered his chest with his hand, looking up at Alex with a wary expression. Alex chuckled at this and nodded in understanding. "That's good." With that, Alex pointed, and 10 steel balls flashed silver, rapidly shooting towards the Mandarin. 10 steel ball magnetic cannons, each at maximum power. Alex didn't want to waste any more time, fearing a delay could lead to a disaster. Without the support of the spaceship, The 10 Commandments could still exert their abilities, but their effectiveness would be greatly reduced. The Mandarin didn't dare to take it head-on. A gravitational field and shockwaves appeared simultaneously, working together to block the steel ball magnetic cannons. Simultaneously, the Mandarin, using the recoil force, flew backward like lightning, avoiding the attack. "Mandarin, surrender," Alex snorted coldly, and the steel balls spun in a circle, accelerating again into magnetic cannons and firing towards the Mandarin. Furthermore, dense energy beams reappeared, attacking the Mandarin from behind and behind, accompanied by steel ball magnetic cannons. The Mandarin's expression changed drastically upon seeing this. His entire body suddenly lit up, and a colossal shadow, 10 feet tall, suddenly leaped from him. With overwhelming pressure, Alex was forced to step back several steps. "What is this?" Alex stared at the enlarged Mandarin's shadow in astonishment, beads of sweat dripping from his forehead, his face pale. "Is this the law of heaven and earth?" The law of heaven and earth is a profound magical power in Eastern magic. When unleashed, the true form grows infinitely, like a giant, its head reaching up to the sky and its feet stomping on the earth, its divine might unparalleled. Of course, the Mandarin's image was only a faint, 10-foot-tall form. Even so, it was enough to terrify Alex. Just then, the magnetic cannons and energy beams approached. Alex immediately wanted to withdraw his attack, but changed his mind and didn't. Alex wanted to see just how powerful the Mandarin's form was. Sensing the approaching attack, the ethereal Mandarin's form's massive face sneered, its mockery evident. Simultaneously, the Mandarin's form suddenly raised its two massive palms, one forward, the other backward, at an incredible speed, even faster than a white laser. As the palm swung out, the magnetic cannon and energy beam arrived as expected, colliding precisely with the form's millstone-sized palms. The form didn't waver, while the energy beam dissipated instantly, like exploding fireworks, a flash of brilliance followed by darkness. Meanwhile, the magnetic cannon was no match for the form. The steel balls, moving at the speed of light, collided with the form's palms, but again, they had no effect. The 10 steel balls seemed to slowly roll towards the Mandarin's hand. Alex's face turned pale at this. He tried to retract the steel balls, but the Dharmakayas' grip was so tight that they couldn't budge. Just as Alex was debating whether to give up, the Dharmakayas' grip suddenly opened, and 10 steel balls flew back at a speed no less than before, aiming directly at Alex. A magnetic field immediately opened, but to Alex's disbelief, a strange energy seemed to shroud the 10 steel balls, rendering them impervious to the magnetic field. By the time Alex realized this, it was too late to dodge. With the steel ball's power, Alex couldn't guarantee that the energy absorption would be effective. With his mind racing, Alex controlled his body to avoid vital areas. His neck instantly stretched dozens of meters, and his head was flung across the battlefield. The steel balls fired by the Mandarin's Dharmakaya were as powerful as, if not more so than, the magnetic cannon. 10 steel balls instantly pierced Alex's body, leaving 10 holes the size of thumbs, from which crimson blood gushed out. The moment the balls approached, Alex attempted to use his ultimate control over his body to move out of their path. Unfortunately, his reaction was slower than the speed of the balls, and he had barely moved a tenth of the way before the balls had already pierced him. The steel balls' after effects seemed to vanish instantly, along with the strange energy within them, and he was instantly trapped in the magnetic field Alex had created. Regaining control of the steel balls, Alex recovered his body and, while activating his elixir to heal himself, turned to gaze at the 10-foot-tall image of the Mandarin, his expression grave. The image's recent display of power had intimidated Alex, especially the strange energy shrouding the steel balls. While Alex was on high alert, the Mandarin was genuinely anxious. The Mandarin had indeed practiced the Dharma of heaven and earth for some time, but he wasn't proficient, having only mastered the basics. Not only was its power significantly diminished, but its duration was also quite short. The constant blocking and attacking consumed a significant portion of his energy, leaving him unable to maintain it for much longer than half a minute at best. If it were a genuine Dharma form, even if it lasted only 10 seconds, the Mandarin would be confident he could defeat Alex. Unfortunately, the current Dharma form was a defective one, leaving him powerless against Alex for even half an hour, let alone half a minute. After a moment's deliberation, the Mandarin began to consider a retreat. However, escaping under Alex's watchful eyes was no easy task. The ship had only been able to escape thanks to the Mandarin's direct restraint. Now, The Mandarin had no one else to help. Time flew by in the Mandarin's anxiety, and as the Dharma form neared its end, he finally made a decision. As long as the Green Mountains remain, there will be no shortage of firewood. The Mandarin looked up at the enormous Dharma image, a look of determination flashing across his face. Alex's attention remained fixed on the Mandarin's Dharma image, and he had relaxed his vigilance towards the Mandarin himself, not noticing the change in his expression. Otherwise, Alex would have reacted immediately. Unfortunately, the situation was already decided. As Alex watched, the immovable Dharma image suddenly began to sway violently, its amplitude increasing in intensity until it reached its peak. Then, like a balloon, the 10-foot-tall Dharma image suddenly exploded. The Dharma image had exploded, something Alex had never seen before, and he was completely stunned. The explosion unleashed a torrent of energy like a tsunami, carrying Alex first. His body was blasted away like a kite with its string cut. The mysterious Dragon Valley was also affected, expanding by more than 3 times its original size, and the ground continued to drop. Seeing Alex flying backward, the unaffected Mandarin was tempted, but after some thought, he decided against it, teleporting away from the spot. The energy shockwave from the Dharmadhatu's self-detonation was swift and utterly extinguished, leaving no trace in the blink of an eye. Only the devastated ground and Alex, sprawled on the ground, remained. After a long moment, Alex shook his head, regaining consciousness. He turned and surveyed the new Dragon Valley, his face filled with horror. Mandarin, you lunatic, Valentine's Day is here. May all lovers find their true love, and may all single friends find their soulmate soon. P.S. Scorpio, where are you? Chapter 418 Reunion after 70 years. Filled with pent-up frustration and lingering palpitations, Alex glanced once more at the utterly wrecked Dragon Valley, then turned and teleported away. As soon as Alex appeared at Academy X, Emma and the others immediately approached, their faces thick with worry. The battle at Dragon Valley had seen a surge of earth-shaking energy, so powerful that the entire planet seemed to tremble. Even a blind person could sense it, let alone Emma and the others, who were not too far from Dragon Valley. The earth-shaking energy explosion nearly stopped Emma and the others' heartbeats and breathing. Audrey clutched her chest with one hand, clutching Alex's shoulder with the other, tears streaming uncontrollably. Alex had no idea that his battle with the Mandarin had already shocked the whole world. He reached out to wipe away the tears from the corners of Audrey's eyes, looked at Emma and the other girls and smiled with ease. Don't you know my abilities? What are you worried about? It's good that you're back. It's good that you're back. Emma sniffed her slightly sour nose, clapped her hands to comfort Audrey and the other girls, then turned to look at Alex, raised her eyes slightly and smiled. There's another good news. What good news? Alex was somewhat unhappy because the Mandarin escaped, and he immediately cheered up when he heard the good news. Nick Fury sent a message that there was a discovery in the Arctic. Emma's eyebrows were smiling, and she deliberately paused for a while when she said this. It's Steve. Steve. Alex was stunned when he heard it. He was stunned for a long time before he slowly spit out a name, his face full of loneliness. It's been 70 years, Steve, you finally showed up. Everyone around knew the relationship between Alex and Steve, and seeing Alex's expression, they didn't say much, but reached out and held Alex's arm tightly as a comfort. After a long pause, Alex sighed wistfully and turned to Emma. Where's Steve? Where's he now? Steve's frozen in ice. Nick Fury has sent a plane to retrieve him. He's in New York, awaiting thawing. Emma's expression shifted slightly, and she added with a hint of concern, Nick Fury's worried about something going wrong, so he's hesitant to thaw him. He said he'll wait until you get back to see him. Alex nodded and was about to leave to find Nick Fury when a thought suddenly crossed his mind. I remember there's a student at the Academy who can control ice. Iceman, the X-Men's super mutant, could create and control ice out of thin air. Although his performance in the movies was average, he was actually considered a powerful mutant with omega potential. Iceman was the perfect person to thaw Steve. Emma was startled, then quickly realized what was happening. She nodded and smiled, saying, Bobby Derek, nicknamed Iceman, I'll find him right away. As she spoke, Emma telepathically located Bobby, who was in class at the Academy. Hearing Emma's voice in his head, Bobby suddenly stood up from his seat, his young face full of excitement. Bobby, you must perform well and don't lose face for the Academy. Bobby received Emma's voice transmission, and the teacher who was teaching the class also received the news, looking at Bobby with a face full of satisfaction. Bobby nodded firmly, and then, Under the surprised eyes of the students in the classroom, he jumped into the air, stepped on the ice bridge through the window, and slid all the way out of the classroom. Looking at Bobby, who rushed in with excitement on his face, Alex nodded and gestured slightly, without giving him a chance to speak, and directly activated the teleportation to SHIELD. Nick, where's Steve? As soon as he appeared, Alex couldn't wait to start yelling, and he was very emotional. Nick Fury smiled wryly and shook his head. He glanced at Bobby beside Alex, then turned to Alex. Don't worry, he can't get away. As he spoke, Nick Fury stood up, walked around the desk, and headed for the door. Come on, I'll take you to see him. Alex couldn't wait any longer and slowly approached. He activated his telepathy to search Nick Fury's mind, finding memories of Steve and instantly pinpointing Steve's current location. Teleporting, Alex, Nick Fury and Bobby instantly arrived at the cold storage where Steve's ice cube was stored. Fearing that the ice would melt and harm Steve, Nick Fury had kept Steve and the ice cube in the cold storage. 70 years, Steve hasn't changed at all. Nick Fury, knowing Alex's feelings, ignored his offense. He turned to look at Steve in the ice, a look of melancholy on his face. Inside the coffin-like ice, Steve lay calm, still dressed in his signature star-spangled captain's uniform, his arms folded across his chest. His shield, dropped to the side, remained pristine. Alex stared into Steve's closed eyes, his lips trembling with excitement as a tear fell unbidden. Reaching out and gently caressing the chilling ice, Alex's face broke into a comforting smile, and he said with a mock-joking tone, 70 years. Steve, you've slept longer than I have. Bobby stood aside, breathless, his gaze shifting between Alex and Nick Fury before finally settling on the massive ice coffin. He vaguely understood the purpose of his visit. After a moment, Alex gradually calmed down. He turned to Bobby, pointed at the coffin, and asked solemnly, can it be saved? Thawing Steve wasn't just a matter of melting the ice, many challenges were involved. Just like the cryonics technology of Alex's previous life, freezing a human body was easy, but thawing and resuscitating it was a challenge, one that remained unsolved until Alex's time travel. While the Marvel Universe's technology was far more advanced than in his previous life, resuscitation remained a significant challenge. This was why Alex considered Iceman, and Bobby was an expert in this area. Bobby immediately wanted to say, absolutely, but after feeling Alex's serious gaze, he finally felt a hint of pressure. After a long moment of careful consideration, he nodded and said seriously, don't worry, there won't be any problems, okay, I believe you. Alex stared at Bobby for a moment, nodded, and said solemnly. Bobby felt a surge of pressure. He took a deep breath, slowly approached the ice coffin, put his hand on it, and closed his eyes to feel it carefully. The ice coffin was not made by Bobby, so if he wanted to control it, he needed to communicate with it first. Beside Alex, Nick Fury looked at Bobby with a puzzled expression. Alex, what is he doing? I don't know. Alex shook his head, paused, and added, but Bobby's ability is to create and control ice. He can definitely save Steve. Create and control ice? There's such an ability, Nick Fury exclaimed in disbelief, his face filled with envy. I envy you mutants. You have all sorts of incredible abilities. Alex chuckled but said nothing, his telepathic focus fixed on Steve. Although he professed his trust in Bobby, Alex remained concerned and secretly prepared, ready to strike at any moment. After all, Bobby was still young and had great potential, but he wasn't yet at Omega level. As expected, after closing his eyes for a long time, Bobby finally began to move. The massive ice coffin suddenly crumbled in his hands, shattering into countless brick-sized chunks of ice. Then, it instantly vaporized, vanishing without a trace, revealing Steve, unharmed within. Not even the pattern on Steve's clothing had shifted. Sensing Steve's life slowly returning, Alex felt a sense of relief. He excitedly rushed forward, grabbed Bobby, and said gratefully, "Thank you, Bobby." Bobby shyly scratched his head. Just as he was about to speak, he realized Alex had already abandoned him and run to Steve's side. Just then, Nick Fury approached, gave Bobby a grateful look, and once again stepped past him to reach Steve's side. At that moment, Steve's tightly closed eyes trembled slightly, then slowly opened, like a spring that had been frozen for a winter and suddenly began to flow. "Alex, Nick, what are you doing here?" Steve frowned, looking around, his handsome face filled with confusion. Alex's eyes were red, and he tried hard to hold back his tears as he whispered, "Welcome back, Steve. Captain America is finally back. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419 70 Years of Waiting. Steve could sense Alex's agitation, his confusion growing even stronger. What's wrong? What happened? Steve sat up, surveyed his surroundings, and inquired again, where's this place? Why does it feel so cold, Steve? This isn't the time for that. Steve's barrage of questions finally jolted Alex awake. Regaining his composure, Alex, without giving Steve a chance to refuse, enveloped the group with his telekinesis and teleported them out of the cold storage. Steve was well acquainted with Alex's teleportation abilities. Watching him and the others appear and disappear, he asked, bewildered, Alex, where are we going? The Hydra base. No. Alex froze, paused for a moment, then replied frantically, my home, my new home. Alex had been dazed after waking up from a 10-year sleep, so what about Steve sleeping for 70? To help Steve come to terms with this, Alex decided to show him someone he knew. After 70 years of sleep, even if a normal person didn't turn into a pile of bones, they'd likely be languishing, like Carter in the movie. Fortunately, Alex was there, and most of Steve's former friends were still alive, with Carter eagerly waiting for him. In a flash, Alex led Steve and his group back to Academy X, where Emma and the others hadn't left yet. Seeing Alex and Steve, Emma and other old acquaintances of Steve's were filled with surprise. Charles and other younger people familiar with Captain America's history stared at the living fossil with astonishment, their faces filled with admiration. Steve, Monroe was the first to rush forward, hugging Steve, tears streaming down her face like a flood. Steve's face flushed red as he looked at the beautiful woman holding him, his expression flustered, his hands raised stiffly in the air, unsure where to put them. Steve's memory of Monroe was still of a young girl, so naturally, he didn't recognize the much-changed Monroe before him. Seeing Steve's awkward expression, Alex couldn't help but laugh, standing up with his hands folded, watching the show, completely ignoring Steve's pleading eyes. After a moment of stalemate, seeing Monroe's embrace getting tighter, Steve finally spoke, Miss, please let me go. Men and women shouldn't touch each other, of course, he learned this from Alex. Every time a woman threw herself into his arms, Alex would say the same thing. Brother Steve, I'm Monroe. Monroe burst into laughter upon hearing this. She seemed to understand. She loosened her arms and looked up at Steve, saying maliciously and cutely, Brother Steve, you didn't forget about little Monroe, did you? You're Monroe. Steve pointed at Monroe, his face full of disbelief. He then turned to look at Alex and repeated, she's Monroe, Steve, she really is Monroe. Alex smiled but didn't say anything. Vivian Lee walked forward with a faint smile on her face. Audrey clung to her side, covering her mouth with her hands and giggling. Steve only then noticed Vivian and Audrey, stunned. Vivian? Audrey? What's going on? He glanced at them, then back at Monroe. His mind was in a turmoil. He turned to Alex and pleaded, Alex, what happened? What's going on, Steve? Wait a moment, Alex chuckled, reassuring Steve. I'll bring someone over and have her explain it to you. With that, Alex vanished, leaving Steve stunned and Nick Fury and the others speechless. A few breaths later, Alex reappeared, accompanied by two women, Carter and Natasha, the Black Widow. Carter? Natasha. Steve's brow furrowed again at the sight of the two women. It wasn't because of them, but because of the equipment they were wearing. It was familiar equipment, only seemingly superior. Natasha smiled meaningfully at Steve, took a half step to the side, and gave Carter a shove. Carter was in a daze and didn't notice at all. He stumbled and fell towards Steve. Steve was quick to catch Carter. Are you okay, Carter? Steve looked at Carter with trembling eyes, and his mood became nervous for no reason, and his voice became a little unnatural. Carter looked up at Steve, slowly stretched out his right hand, and gently stroked Steve's face. Steve, you are finally back. I finally waited for you. Carter, let's get up and talk. It's really inconvenient. Carter's eyes were too intense, and Steve felt an inexplicable guilt in his heart. He didn't dare to look Carter in the eye. He reached out and helped Carter, who was leaning on his side, to his feet. He turned around and was about to ask Alex, but found that the room was already deserted. Only he and Carter were left in the huge room. Why are they all gone? Steve, increasingly bewildered, stared panickedly out the door, ready to head out. "Let's get out too." Steve had barely lifted one foot when Carter's voice rang out from behind him, a hint of tears, a hint of resentment, and anger. "Steve, I've waited for you for 70 years, and this is how you treat me." "What? What did you say?" Steve's mind exploded. He turned to look at Carter, his mind blank. The word 70 years echoed in Steve's ears, deafening like a grenade exploding beside him on a battlefield. Seeing Steve's stunned expression, Carter's initial resentment instantly dissipated, leaving only heartache. After a long pause, Steve finally regained consciousness and rushed to Carter's side. He stared at him, and asked, each word clearly, "Carter, tell me, what's going on?" Carter stretched out his arms and hugged Steve's waist and abdomen, resting his head lightly on Steve's chest, and whispered, "Steve, you have been sleeping for 70 years and just woke up today. The truth will always be revealed." Carter did not choose to hide it, nor did he beat around the bush. After a brief pause, he began to explain in detail, "You suddenly disappeared during World War II and have been gone for 70 years. We only found you under the Arctic ice a few days ago." Carter raised his head and looked at Steve, who was shocked. He reached out and wiped Steve's frown, and continued, "Today, thanks to Alex, you were thawed and revived." After explaining, Carter did not speak again, but raised his head and stared at Steve carefully, always paying attention to Steve's changes. Thankfully, after nearly half an hour of silence, Steve's frozen expression finally shifted slightly, a faint skepticism on his face. "Has it really been 70 years? Less than 70, Carter shook his head. Before Steve could even smile, he added, "To be exact, 66 years, 7 months, and 13 days, Steve fell silent again. After a long pause, he gazed down at Carter, sighing leisurely. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting. I'm glad you're back," Carter replied, tears welling up in his eyes. Steve and Carter were indeed a perfect match. After 70 years of waiting, their lover had finally found love. Chapter 420, Captain America's First Battle, Part 1. In the blink of an eye, half a day passed. Steve and Carter emerged from the room and found Alex and his group next door. Alex was the first to stand upon seeing Steve and Carter. His gaze flicked back and forth between their faces. With a final thought in mind, he chuckled and looked at Steve. "Steve, how are you feeling?" "Not bad. I had a good sleep," Steve shrugged, shifting his body, and said with a self-deprecating air. "I just slept a little too long, so I feel stiff." Nick Fury stepped forward and punched Steve in the chest, his single eye brimming with joy. "It just so happens that there's a case in New York. I'll leave it to you." "What case?" Alex looked at Nick Fury in surprise, a hint of worry in his eyes. During World War II, Steve was a true war hero, few could rival him. But in today's world, with powerful villains aplenty, it was hard to say with Steve's strength. Nick Fury chuckled and said with a carefree expression, "Nothing much, just a scientist who transformed himself into Lizard and is running around New York, Dr. Lizard?" Alex was startled by the words, his first thought being Spider-Man's old enemy. Dr. Lizard? That's a good name. Nick Fury pinched his chin, looking at Alex in surprise. "I didn't expect you were so good at nicknames." Alex rolled his eyes, ignoring Nick Fury's awkward joke. He turned to look at Steve and smiled. "A lizard man, with Steve's skills, is no problem." "Alex, are you looking down on me?" Steve's face was filled with anger. He clenched his fists and pretended to charge, gesturing as he shouted, "Watch out, I'm gonna beat you up." Knowing the two were joking, Carter gave Steve a strange look and muttered, "Steve, you've never beaten Alex before. Don't embarrass yourself." Although it was just a muttering, it was loud enough for everyone in the room to hear clearly. "That's because he runs fast." Steve paused after hearing this, argued, then turned to look at Carter and asked angrily, "Are you my girlfriend or his? Why do you always speak for him?" Because what Carter said is true. Seeing a group of people talking and laughing like before, Natasha also came up, jokingly added a knife, pointing at Nick Fury and others, and said with a smile, "We can all testify to this. Okay, you win." Steve couldn't resist the unity of the crowd, raised his hand to show weakness, but muttered softly, "Can't you understand me, an old man who has been sleeping for 70 years? This sentence caused the whole audience to burst into laughter. Young people like Charles, who had only heard the legend of Captain America, were even more stunned, with an expression of disbelief on their faces. Is this still the Captain America they know? After a long chat and laughter, Steve, possessing a strong sense of responsibility, took the initiative to mention Dr. Lizard. Alex, take me to New York. I can't wait for a fight. After 70 years of slumber, no one could recover instantly. Despite Steve's cheerfulness, he was probably still holding on to a lot of anger. Holding it in for too long would only lead to problems, and a fight would be a much easier way for Steve to vent. Mumbling to himself, Alex nodded and agreed. As you wish, Steve. With that, Alex activated teleportation, bringing Steve, Nick Fury, and the others back to SHIELD. Is this SHIELD? Steve had heard Carter talk about the changes over the past 70 years, and upon arriving in Nick Fury's office, he immediately realized what was happening, surveying the various high-tech devices in the room with curiosity. Nick Fury chuckled in response, pressed a red button, and ordered seriously, Coulson, bring Dr. Lizard's information to my office. He paused briefly, glanced sideways at Steve, and added, by the way, bring the equipment too. Someone needs some exercise. Yes, Chief, I'll be right there. An excited voice trembled. Seeing Steve's bewildered expression, Nick Fury grinned. Phil Coulson, your biggest fan. He's the one who brought you back from the Arctic. I have a lot of fans, Steve replied proudly, then looked at Nick Fury expectantly. What's the new equipment? Is it impressive? And Howard? Where is he now? During World War II, Howard was in charge of the weapons and equipment for Steve and the others, so Steve immediately thought of Howard, who hadn't appeared yet. As the saying goes, good news is better than bad news. Carter didn't dare tell Steve about Howard's death shortly after Steve woke up. I'm sorry, Steve. The room fell silent after hearing Steve's question. After a long moment, Alex stood up, his face etched with guilt. I didn't protect Howard. What's going on, Carter? Steve frowned, turning to look at Carter. Carter shook his head bitterly, explaining softly, Alex had some kind of accident and wasn't on Earth. He's been gone for over 30 years. Huh? Steve stared at Alex in surprise, stunned for a moment before looking like he'd found a soulmate. Seeing Steve's expression, Alex could only smile wryly. Just then, there was a knock on the door, and a middle-aged man with a broad forehead and a receding hairline pushed through. His eyes swept across the room, finally locking onto Steve, his face flushed with excitement. Coulson, you are too excited. Nick Fury coughed lightly, woke up Coulson, pointed at Steve and said with a smile, don't worry, you will see him every day from now on. Don't be so excited. Coulson chuckled dryly, glanced at Steve, handed the equipment in his hand over, then walked straight past Steve to Nick Fury, handed the information in his other hand to Nick Fury, and reported the latest news with a serious face. The lizard man seems to have been in trouble recently, and that Spider-Man who likes to swing seems to be hunting him. Spider-Man, he's also involved. Hearing Coulson's words, Alex chuckled secretly, and muttered in his heart, the fateful enemies are still facing each other, but with Captain America's intervention. I don't know how it will develop. Nick Fury glanced at Steve, who was trying out the new equipment, and threw the information Coulson handed over casually. Steve, do you have any ideas? This should be given to Alex. Steve raised his head when he heard the voice, glanced at Nick Fury, and then turned his gaze to Alex with a faint smile on his face. All I want now is a big fight. Sorry, I'm just watching the show. Alex shook his head, folded his hands, and looked like I'm just a bystander. Nick Fury chuckled and joined Alex's side. Ignoring Steve's irritation, he said seriously, Steve, this is a test from the organization. You must complete the mission diligently and rigorously. You too. Steve smiled wryly and shook his head, looking down at the documents in his hands with a serious expression. Captain America's debut in the new century is about to begin. Everyone is waiting to see. P.S. Scorpio created a group yesterday, but no one has joined in a day. Tears welling up. Chapter 421 Captain America's First Battle, Part 2. Steve was a qualified soldier, taking his mission very seriously. This was his first mission since his resurrection, so he took it all the more seriously. The first page of the profile featured two photos. The one on the left showed a giant, standing lizard, its all-green skin looking quite menacing. Next to it was another photo of a kind, middle-aged man with a scholarly air. At first glance, he looked more like a university professor than a villain. Next to him was a name, Kurt Connors. Are these two the same person? Steve held up the two photos uncertainly, looking up at Nick Fury. Nick Fury nodded and explained, According to our investigation, it's very likely they're the same person. You can read on for details." Steve said nothing more, lowering his head to continue examining the profile. "Huh, he's a doctor." Steve's eyes flicked across the photo, landing on the information behind it. The man Alex had nicknamed Dr. Lizard was actually a doctor in biology, and a brilliant doctor. Alex chuckled in response, but remained silent. Of all the people present, no one understood Dr. Lizard better than Alex. Alex knew everything SHIELD could find, and even more than that. Dr. Lizard was a pitiful man, a somewhat paranoid one. Dr. Kurt Connors, a doctor, was drafted into the military. During a surprise attack, Connors was severely injured, and his right arm was amputated, leaving him one-armed. Unwilling to live a life of one-armed life, Connors returned to university, abandoning surgery and dedicating himself to studying reptilian regeneration and various aspects of reptilian biology. He sought to restore his own lost arm and to develop human regenerative limbs for medical applications. Lizards, with their ability to regenerate severed limbs, naturally became Connors's primary research target. He longed to transfer the genetic trait of lizards' tail regeneration to humans, allowing them to regenerate limbs. After a lengthy experiment, Connors succeeded, and the serum he created worked flawlessly in animal experiments. Overwhelmed with excitement, Connors lost his scientist composure and rationality. He felt that a successful case study was sufficient reason to skip human testing and injected himself with the serum. As expected, Connors's severed limbs regenerated, but he gradually transformed into a human with a lizard-like appearance. Even more terrifying, not only his appearance but also Connors's mind was completely distorted. Connors took refuge in the sewers and began his plan to bring reptiles to the surface. Recalling Dr. Lizard's message, Alex began to formulate a battle plan for Steve. Although he professed his unwillingness to help, Alex secretly cared deeply for Steve. Dr. Lizard's abilities were modest, compared to the other supervillains Alex knew. After transforming into Dr. Lizard, Connors gained superhuman strength, capable of lifting several tons, and his reflexes and agility were greatly enhanced. Dr. Lizard's hide also provided considerable defensive power, rendering him impervious to ordinary fists, kicks, and small-caliber weapons. However, none of Dr. Lizard's abilities posed any threat to Steve. Transformed by the super soldier serum, Steve's physique was superhuman. While his strength might be inferior to Dr. Lizard's, he was certainly not significantly inferior in other areas. Furthermore, Steve possessed a shield, an indestructible shield that Dr. Lizard's skin could not withstand. Alex's biggest concern was Dr. Lizard's intelligence. Like many Marvel supervillains, they relied on their intelligence to dominate the Marvel universe, and Dr. Lizard was no exception. Even as Dr. Lizard, Connors retained his original intelligence. It wasn't that Steve's intelligence was lacking, but rather that Dr. Lizard was prone to scheming and deception, which was Steve's weakness. For that very reason alone, if Dr. Lizard took humans hostage, Steve would undoubtedly be unable to react. While Alex was thinking, Steve had also finished reading the information, sorting his new equipment, and stood up. "All understood, let's go now. Sorry, we don't know where he is." Callison had not left since entering, and had been standing behind Steve. Hearing Steve's words, he explained with an embarrassed face. "I know, the sewers." Steve turned to look at Callison and said confidently. "The New York sewers are complicated and it won't be easy to find Dr. Lizard." Dr. Lizard was hiding in the sewers, and Nick Fury had guessed it, but finding Dr. Lizard in the New York sewers was harder than climbing to the sky. Steve shrugged and smiled. Dr. Lizard has been continuing his experiments, as evidenced by the number of times he's robbed his targets. His eyes swept across the documents on the table, then he turned to look at everyone in the room. He coughed lightly and continued, "And to conduct experiments, the space must be spacious and as clean and tidy as possible. Biological experiments should have quite high requirements for this." "I see." Callison's eyes lit up, immediately understanding. He hurried out, saying, "I'll investigate immediately. I'll have news in 10 minutes. Callison is such an impatient person." Steve sighed as he watched Callison leave, his gaze slowly shifting to Alex, his eyes filled with amusement. Unlike Callison, Alex was definitely a slow person. In other words, lazy. Having spent years with Steve, Alex naturally discerned the depth of his gaze. He snorted coldly, ignoring the thought, and walked straight over to Steve. "Steve, Dr. Lizard is a bit stronger than you. Let me recharge you." As soon as he finished speaking, Alex thrust out his hands and grasped Steve's shoulder blades, swooping down like an eagle. "What are you doing, Alex?" Steve didn't shy away, letting Alex's grip ripple through his face, confusion thick in his eyes. "I told you, I'm recharging you." Alex glared at Steve with a sly smile, then shook his hands. A surge of energy flowed through his palms, piercing through Steve's shoulder blades and into his body. Intentionally trying to inflict pain on Steve, Alex initially didn't control the surge of energy, letting it flow freely like the Yangtze River into the sea, unstoppable. Steve had heard Carter talk about Alex's abilities and knew he possessed the uncanny ability to control energy. He immediately spotted Alex's sinister intentions and burst into rage. "Alex, you did that on purpose, didn't you?" "I didn't, I did it on purpose." Alex glanced at Carter, who looked at him with a pitiful expression, and smirked, looking like he deserved a beating. That being said, Alex immediately controlled the torrent of energy flowing through Steve's body and began meticulously processing it, gradually transforming and elevating it. When Kelson returned with the news about Dr. Lizard, Steve had become different, radiating energy. "Here comes the second update. It feels like the next one is a long time coming. What should I do?" Chapter 422 Dr. Lizard, Part 1. Kelson glanced at Steve in surprise, his eyes filled with wonder, but he didn't ask. He shook the papers in his hands and said seriously, "The location has been basically confirmed. These are the most likely locations." Steve smiled, took the documents from Kelson's hand, glanced at them, and handed them to Alex beside him. "Steve, you're really relying on me," Alex complained angrily, his hands still involuntarily turning over the documents, glancing at them before handing them back to Kelson. Steve ignored Alex's complaint. He pulled out the shield from behind him, strapped it on his arm, and asked calmly, "Are we ready to go?" "Let's go." Alex rolled his eyes, nodded to the others, and then teleported away. After 2 consecutive failed teleportations, Alex finally found the right place with his third teleportation attempt. It was a sewer main, a vast expanse of space. In a corner, a separate area had been carved out, separated by a transparent plastic curtain. A dim light shone from within, and the faint sound of machinery could be heard. "This is it," Alex said, leaving Steve alone and disappearing in a flash. "Leave it to you, Steve." Steve pointed his finger at the air, hummed softly, raised his shield, and carefully opened the curtain, heading inside. After a few steps, Steve suddenly realized something was wrong. There was not a single breath in the entire sewer laboratory, as if no one was there. With this thought, Steve's actions became bolder. He quickly searched the entire area, but indeed, no one was seen. "Did he leave?" Steve muttered, glancing around and idly flipping through the various notes on the table. This glance actually brought Steve to something unexpected. The notes were filled with various experimental data, recorded page by page according to the date. It seemed that Dr. Lizard had been conducting experiments continuously. However, what made Steve suspicious was that the last data in the notes was from a month ago, considering that there were almost daily experimental records at the beginning of the notes. This is not Dr. Lizard's experimental base, Steve's mind raced, and he suddenly realized, this is just a fake laboratory deliberately set up by Dr. Lizard to confuse people. Thinking of this, Steve frowned tightly and muttered softly, "It seems that Dr. Lizard has prepared for it. Since Dr. Lizard set up such a fake laboratory here, it seems that he has known that his whereabouts are not secret. Then Dr. Lizard's real hiding place is probably not the sewer, but other more secret places." As Steve was thinking, he suddenly froze. His hand, which had just been about to lift the plastic curtain, froze in midair. He turned to look at the fake lab behind him, his mind going blank. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, since Dr. Lizard knew his whereabouts weren't secret, and since he would choose a more secret location, then there's no need to build a fake lab here. Steve's mind raced, one thought after another flashing through his mind. The only possibility is that there's truth within the fake, and the real lab is here too. At this thought, Steve suddenly realized something. He immediately stopped moving and scanned every inch of the lab. In another room, just across the wall from the lab, Dr. Lizard sat before a monitor. The screen showed Steve, who had just turned around. Seeing Steve turn around, a flicker of surprise flashed across Dr. Lizard's amber-clear eyes. Then turned a faint blood red, and a murderous aura permeated him. When Steve returned to the lab, a figure emerged from a dark corner outside. It was Alex, who had left earlier. In reality, Alex hadn't left at all, he'd been nearby the entire time. Although he trusted Steve's abilities, Alex still felt a bit uneasy. Worried that Steve might be upset, Alex watched from the sidelines, never taking action until the crucial moment. Luckily, I didn't get tricked by that Dr. Lizard guy. He wasn't too slow on the ups and downs. Dr. Lizard's hiding skills were brilliant, but Alex couldn't detect them. Alex had known Dr. Lizard was there from the beginning. So, when he saw Steve about to leave, Alex was almost tempted to reveal himself. Fortunately, Steve eventually noticed something was amiss. Researching the lab, the ever more observant Steve quickly found a spot with a hidden camera. Meanwhile, Dr. Lizard, realizing he'd been exposed, didn't wait for Steve to follow the camera. With a roar, he slammed his head against the wall in front of him and leaped out. Hearing the noise, Steve immediately threw his shield over himself, his face wary as he gazed at the giant green lizard before him. A flicker of surprise flickered in his eyes. Dr. Connors, Kurt, transformed into a lizard, was no Dr. Connors. With another eerie roar, Dr. Lizard launched his massive body into the air, lunging at Steve, his clawed forelimbs lashing out as if to rip him to shreds. Knowing Dr. Lizard's immense strength, coupled with the impact of the pounce, Steve hesitated. He misstepped, dodging Dr. Lizard's advance. Just as Steve was about to strike back, he felt a sudden tightening around his waist. Looking down, he saw Dr. Lizard's tail entwine itself around him. I forgot I had this. Steve's face brimmed with regret, but his hands moved quickly. He raised his shield high, then brought it down with such force that Dr. Lizard's tail would surely be severed. Unrelated sentence fragment, no mistakes, one post, one content, one 6, one book, one forum, one look. Unfortunately, Dr. Lizard didn't give Steve a chance. Before his shield could even fall, Dr. Lizard's tail lashed out, sending Steve flying unbidden, knocking over several tables before finally slamming into the wall, leaving a visible mark. What a tragedy. Alex, once again lurking in the darkness, observed this with a slight smile, a look of gloating delight on his face. As soon as he finished speaking, Steve leaped down from the wall, his face filled with rage, his eyes blazing with anger as he looked at Dr. Lizard. Yet, that's the look. Alex's smile widened, his gaze at Dr. Lizard tinged with pity. Steve was usually a good guy, but if he got angry, it could be a real problem. Red Skull had paid the price for that before, and now it was Dr. Lizard's turn. Dr. Lizard had no idea what Steve's look meant, but seeing Steve standing up unharmed, his ferocity suddenly surged, and he leaped at Steve again. Good, Steve shouted softly, breaking into a run and actively heading towards Dr. Lizard at an incredible speed. Something happened today, so the update is a little late. Here's the first one first, and I'll make up for it with the second one as soon as possible. Chapter 423 Dr. Lizard, Part 2. A man and a monster, one white, one green, the two figures quickly collided. Surprisingly, the one sent flying was the much larger and far more powerful Dr. Lizard. Observing Steve, crouched on the ground, his star-spangled shield propped against his head, Alex, in the darkness, smiled with satisfaction. After 70 years of sleep, I finally remembered my fighting skills. Captain America's shield was no ordinary weapon, it could withstand even Thor's hammer, so it was no problem for him to send Dr. Lizard flying. Dr. Lizard was even more utterly wrecked than Steve had been. He flew backward, collapsing a wall and landing in his previous hiding room, his skin tarnished by the impact. Steve quickly stood up, his steps swift, and with a few leaps and bounds, he was in front of Dr. Lizard. Without giving Dr. Lizard a chance to recover, he launched a barrage of blows. Unfortunately, despite Steve's immense strength, the damage to Dr. Lizard, with his lizard skin, was less than the damage he had inflicted. Staring at Steve's ferocious blow, Dr. Lizard leaped to his feet, his sinister gaze fixed on Alex. After a long silence, he spoke for the first time. "Who are you, Steve Rogers?" Steve took a few steps back, his gaze glancing over Dr. Lizard's tail as he replied seriously, "Oh, I have another name, Captain America." Dr. Lizard was startled, gazing at Steve in disbelief for a moment. His face darkened, and he warned him coldly, "Mind your own business, Captain America." "Sorry, I can't do that." Steve raised his shield and shook his head gravely. Dr. Lizard snorted coldly, saying nothing, before charging at Steve again. Connors was ultimately just a scientist. Even after transforming into Dr. Lizard, his physical prowess was enhanced at best. In terms of combat skills, he was no match for Steve, relying solely on his immense physical prowess. As time went on, Dr. Lizard grew increasingly defeated, while Steve grew more courageous. This was partly due to Steve's battle memories being refreshed, and partly because Alex's transformation of Steve was gradually taking effect. In the shadows, Alex's smile widened as he watched Steve's fight become increasingly effective. Captain America's debut in this new century is a resounding success. Just as Alex was about to emerge to win the fight, Dr. Lizard suddenly leaped up, slammed the manhole cover open, and swiftly leaped out. Dr. Lizard's movement was so swift and unexpected that neither Steve, who was fighting him, nor Alex, who was watching from afar, could react. After a moment's pause, they quickly followed him out of the sewer. Meanwhile, Dr. Lizard's appearance had caused chaos on the streets of New York, with terrified pedestrians fleeing in all directions. Steve emerged from the sewer, stunned again by the strange, sci-fi world around him. For the first time since his resurrection, Steve experienced firsthand the wonders of modern society. Alex quietly followed Steve onto the streets of New York. Seeing Steve dazed, Alex couldn't help but warn him, "Steve, the mission is important." After saying this, Alex paused and added, "Steve, you're on your own from now on." "I can't help." Hearing Alex's voice, Steve instantly regained consciousness. He looked up at the rampaging Dr. Lizard in the distance and, with a swift gait, he immediately ran after him, paying no attention to Alex's last words. "I'll give you a ride." Seeing Steve rising to pursue Dr. Lizard, Alex estimated that with Steve's speed, he wouldn't be able to catch up. This wasn't a cramped sewer, the open road was more suitable for Dr. Lizard's escape. Furthermore, Dr. Lizard was reckless, and Steve, busy chasing him and also trying to keep an eye on passers-by, naturally lagged behind. Alex didn't teleport Steve directly with him, but instead cast several status spells on him, instantly increasing Steve's speed several times over, and he caught up with Dr. Lizard in a flash. "Get lost!" Dr. Lizard roared at Steve, who was standing in his way. With a swipe of his tail, he swept up a car and flung it at Steve, then turned and fled in the other direction. Dr. Lizard knew New York was full of nosy people, and if he stayed in the city, he would be in danger. So, desperate to shake off Captain America and hide in the sewers, Steve had initially intended to chase Dr. Lizard, but when he heard screams from the tumbling car, he glanced at the retreating Dr. Lizard and turned to meet it. Carefully catching the car, without even checking the safety of the girl inside, Steve turned and sped off in the direction Dr. Lizard had disappeared, secretly trying to contact Alex. "Can't you help?" Seeing Dr. Lizard's continued destruction, Steve couldn't care less. He just wanted to capture Dr. Lizard as quickly as possible. "Excuse me, Steve," Alex, sensing Steve's inner thoughts, replied with a wry smile, "The mutant situation is very delicate. My presence will severely irritate the humans." Steve paused for a moment, then seemed to understand. He nodded in understanding, and without further ado, he pursued Dr. Lizard with all his might. Alex couldn't attack him, but he could cast status spells on Steve. With Alex's assistance, Steve once again caught up to Dr. Lizard. Seeing Steve once again closing in on him, Dr. Lizard was furious and puzzled. How could Steve possibly catch up with him at such speed? Steve hadn't displayed such speed in previous battles. Dr. Lizard, surrender. Seeing Dr. Lizard stop, Steve didn't rush forward, but instead tried to persuade him to surrender. Alex, hiding in the shadows, saw Steve's reaction and, with a look of confusion on his face, whispered, "Steve, no more nonsense. Let's capture him first, and finish this quickly." Steve gave an awkward smile, but still didn't attack, waiting for Dr. Lizard's response. Steve's intentions were doomed to fail. Dr. Lizard roared and charged. Dr. Lizard had realized that if he didn't finish Captain America today, he might not be able to escape. So, from the outset, Dr. Lizard went all out, increasing both strength and speed to the hilt. Dr. Lizard's pace was noticeably faster, and Steve, accustomed to previous battles, was unable to adjust for a moment, taking several hits before he finally settled in. The battle, which had just been on a decline, suddenly turned around, and Steve began to dominate Dr. Lizard. Seeing this, the panicked crowd gradually calmed down, and the bravest ones even stopped to watch from a distance. Within a minute, the video of Captain America battling the Lizard Man began circulating online. After 70 years of silence, Captain America returned to the public eye, and his fame soared. Second update here. Chapter 424 Dr. Lizard, Part 2. Steve wasn't concerned with his reputation right now, he was more focused on taking down Dr. Lizard immediately. Realizing he was no match for Captain America, Dr. Lizard immediately changed his strategy, focusing on evasion. Dr. Lizard possessed strong legs and excellent jumping ability, moving swiftly through the empty city. Coupled with Dr. Lizard's occasional sabotage attempts to distract Steve, Steve was left completely helpless. Alex, is there any other way? Seeing Dr. Lizard's increasing ferocity, Steve's face lit up with anxiety, and he again turned to Alex for help. Steve knew Alex must be nearby. Alex's face was bitter, and just as he was about to strike, he suddenly spotted a figure speeding towards him from the horizon. Upon closer inspection, he saw it was Spider-Man. Seeing this, Alex chuckled softly. "Don't worry, help is here." Steve, somewhat surprised, dismissed it as someone from SHIELD, and continued his efforts to entangle Dr. Lizard. Less than a minute later, Steve heard laughter in the air. Looking up, he saw a figure in a tight-fitting red and blue spider suit leaping down. Steve was about to speak when Spider-Man scurried over, his face gazing at him in amazement. His mouth blared like a machine gun. "Captain America, you're Captain America." Steve froze for a moment, a hint of embarrassment hidden beneath his hood. He nodded and said, "Hello, I'm..." Steve loved his code name, but he was deeply ashamed of how disastrous his first battle after his resurrection had been, and how much casualties he had caused. "Lizard, don't run away," Spider-Man interrupted Steve before he could finish. A flash of white light followed Spider-Man's words. Steve looked over and saw that Dr. Lizard had taken advantage of the moment they were talking to escape. Unfortunately, he had been entangled in a web, and was now cursing and tearing at it. "Hello, Captain America." Spider-Man was not in a hurry at all. He left Dr. Lizard and turned to look at Steve. He stretched out a hand and introduced himself. "I am Spider-Man, the superhero who protects New York." "Hello, Spider-Man." Steve was stunned by Spider-Man's self-introduction. He looked Spider-Man up and down, nodded and pointed at Dr. Lizard and said, "Let's catch Dr. Lizard first, so that he won't hurt other people again." Dr. Lizard? Spider-Man obviously didn't grasp the point of Steve's words. He tilted his head to think about the title of Dr. Lizard. After pondering for a moment, he nodded and said, "Dr. Lizard, this name is very pleasant to the ear, better than Lizard Man Demon." In the dark, Alex listened to Spider-Man's muttering and couldn't help but be stunned. He shouted angrily through telepathy, "Peter Parker, now is not the time to think about this, okay?" "Who?" Peter Parker was directly awakened by Alex's telepathic vibration. He shouted subconsciously. He reacted immediately after saying one word and quickly closed his mouth. Steve was surprised by Peter Parker's reaction, shaking his head in a quivering, then sprinted towards Dr. Lizard, who had already broken free from the web. Peter Parker, regaining consciousness and observing Steve's movements, followed suit. However, compared to Steve's sprint, Spider-Man's movements were much more impressive. A thread of silk flew out, clinging to the wall of a distant building, and Spider-Man swung onto the trapeze, catching up with Dr. Lizard and sending him crashing to the ground. Steve shrugged imperceptibly, but his pace quickened. He raised his arm and flung his shield, striking Dr. Lizard in the back of the head as he began to rise. Dr. Lizard screamed and fell to the ground again. The star-spangled shield, driven back by the recoil, landed back in Steve's hand in the blink of an eye. "Beautiful." Spider-Man, perched on a streetlight, gave Steve a thumbs up as he charged. Steve's brow furrowed slightly displeased with Spider-Man's playful attitude. He nodded in response, then raised his shield and launched another blow at Dr. Lizard. Having fought in the sewers, Steve knew Dr. Lizard's strength well. While Spider-Man and he seemed to have the upper hand, they hadn't actually harmed Dr. Lizard at all. As expected, as Steve approached, before his shield could descend, Dr. Lizard suddenly leaped up, his tail swung out, and slammed down at Steve with a powerful impact. Steve, anticipating this, flipped his shield in front of him. With a crisp clang, Dr. Lizard's tail struck the shield, sending Steve, huddled behind it, involuntarily stepping back. "Dr. Lizard, you forgot I'm here." Peter Parker's voice rang out the moment Steve was knocked back. With Peter Parker's slightly playful voice, Spider-Man leaped from the streetlight, striking a swift pose, and charged directly at Dr. Lizard. Dr. Lizard naturally hadn't forgotten Spider-Man. The two had clashed numerous times. "I've been waiting," With a cold snort, Dr. Lizard twisted his body in a strange arc. His head, originally facing away from Spider-Man, suddenly turned towards him, his two front claws thrust out like lightning. With a muffled grunt, Spider-Man somersaulted mid-air, landing backwards. Looking at Dr. Lizard again, his eyes were obscured by a thick layer of white web. Furthermore, Dr. Lizard's front claws were also entangled. "I didn't expect you to become so powerful again." Peter Parker's tone changed from playful to serious, and his face, hidden beneath the mask, took on a more solemn expression. Peter Parker had fought Dr. Lizard numerous times and knew his strength to a certain extent. But just now, after a few moves, Peter Parker was surprised to discover that Dr. Lizard had greatly improved in both strength and reaction speed. Dr. Lizard grinned, his blood-stained mouth open wide. His scarlet tongue flickered rapidly as his hoarse voice rang out, filled with unspeakable anger. "Little bug, are you trying to meddle in other people's business too? I suddenly realize the name Lizard Man Demon suits you better." Peter Parker stared at Dr. Lizard. After a long silence, he suddenly spoke, not forgetting to ask Dr. Lizard, "What do you think, Lizard Man Demon? It seems you really are going to meddle in other people's business." Dr. Lizard, neither annoyed nor angry, cautiously stepped back and turned to look at Steve and Peter Parker in front and behind him. A strange light flickered in his amber eyes. Dr. Lizard had just finished speaking, and Peter Parker was about to make another sarcastic remark when a figure suddenly descended from the sky and landed right behind Dr. Lizard. They formed a triangle with Steve and Peter Parker, surrounding Dr. Lizard. "And I, too, want to meddle in your business." Late again. Second update, trying to catch up. P.S. Guess who the new guy is? Hint, it's a character who's already appeared. Chapter 425, Three Heroes Fighting the Lizard, Part 1. The man arrived wearing a uniform resembling Captain America's, except the country was now British, with a large Union Jack adorning his chest. At first glance, he mistook it for the X-Men's X symbol. Peter Parker's chatterbox habit struck again. He turned to look at the man, then glanced sideways at Steve, grinning. "Who are you, Captain Britain?" The man paused, glanced shyly at Steve, dressed in Captain America, nodded, and excitedly shouted, Yes, I am Captain Britain." Alex, who had been wondering in the dark about this new Captain Britain, shuddered at a youthful, trembling voice. He stared at him in disbelief, muttering to himself, "It's Brian. How did he become Captain Britain?" Then, thinking of Brian's admiration for Captain America, Alex felt relieved. With Brian's passion, he would surely follow in the footsteps of Captain America after gaining power. And of course, now he was Captain Britain, though he still only called it that. Alex guessed Brian's identity, but others didn't. Peter Parker, hearing Brian's youthful voice, couldn't help but exclaim, "So he's a rookie." Peter Parker didn't mean anything by it, his words came out without a second thought. Brian's words were infuriating. Having just obtained the Sword of the Stone, Brian was feeling elated. Peter Parker's words were pure contempt. Thinking of this, Brian forgot about his enemy and, unwittingly pulling out the sword, pointed at Peter Parker and shouted, "Spider-Boy, you're not much older." Brian had just obtained the Sword of the Stone, and in his rage, he somehow triggered its power. A massive bolt of pure energy shot out, hurtling towards Peter Parker like lightning. Everyone present was stunned by this scene. Peter Parker, the first to be struck, Steve and Dr. Lizard nearby, even Alex and the other citizens watching from afar were momentarily stunned. A loud bang startled everyone awake. Looking over, Peter Parker stood in a panic, dozens of meters from where he had been. Behind him, a 40-story building had been split open by a massive crack, nearly splitting it in two. The cut was incredibly smooth. "Damn, is the Sword in the Stone that powerful?" Alex, regaining consciousness, stared at the cleaved building. This was the first thing that came to his mind, and he felt a surge of envy towards Brian. Back in the Chaos Dimension, Alex could only use the Sword in the Stone like a kitchen knife. The earth-shattering force of the sword just now was nothing compared to that. Meanwhile, Brian, realizing his blunder, nervously apologized. I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to, you did." Peter Parker was furious. If it weren't for his sharp spider sense and quick reflexes, he'd have been nearly cleaved in half by the sword. Brian's face paled. He opened his mouth to explain, but he didn't know what to say, and stammered. Dr. Lizard initially prepared to flee, but recalling the sword energy and seeing Brian bewildered, he finally stayed and began to recruit him. Little one, you can join me. Brian, a man of justice, was no match for Dr. Lizard. It would have been fine if Dr. Lizard hadn't spoken, but his words immediately reminded Brian, venting all his anger and frustration on Dr. Lizard, "It's all your fault." With a fierce roar, Brian, brandishing the sword in the stone, charged at Dr. Lizard. Having witnessed the power of the sword energy, Dr. Lizard dared not confront Brian and quickly turned and fled. Heading towards Peter Parker. Dr. Lizard assumed that Brian and Peter Parker already had a grudge, and a fight would likely ensue, giving him a chance to escape. Lizard Man Demon, this road is blocked. Peter Parker, unaware of Dr. Lizard's intentions, immediately intervened. At that moment, a sudden burst of sword energy emerged, slicing off a large chunk of flesh from Dr. Lizard's right arm like lightning, then flew straight towards Peter Parker. Once again, Peter Parker's spider sense saved his life. The moment the sword's force slashed at Dr. Lizard's flesh, Peter Parker dodged, twisting his body with all his might. He finally avoided the blow, though a massive gash still ripped through his tights. "Kid, what the hell are you doing?" Peter Parker raged, pointing at Brian and yelling, "I think you're in cahoots with the Lizard Man Demon, deliberately messing things up." Brian, not expecting to have nearly injured Peter Parker again, panicked and shook his head in defense. No, I really wasn't. Stop arguing, let's take down Dr. Lizard first." Steve chased after them, pointing at the fleeing Dr. Lizard and shouting, "We'll talk about the rest later." He gave Brian a long look, his head bowed, and said in a deep voice, "We'll talk about the rest later." Although Captain America had been gone for a while, his prestige was still immense. His words immediately silenced Peter Parker and Brian, who turned and attacked Dr. Lizard together. Dr. Lizard was practically suicidal. Captain America was formidable enough, Spider-Man was even more troublesome, and now there was Captain Britain, wielding a powerful sword. It was truly unlucky. Of Steve and the other two, Brian, with his sword in the stone, was the fastest. But after two recent missteps, Brian hesitated to exert his strength or activate the sword in flight. He simply ran, and soon he was lagging behind, unable even to catch up with Steve. Peter Parker caught up to Dr. Lizard and delivered a head-on kick, knocking him down once more. Then, a shield flew from behind, striking the back of Dr. Lizard's head precisely as he had just raised it. Seeing this, Brian, lagging behind, panicked. If Dr. Lizard were defeated, he would be finished. How could he atone for his sins? Take a look at the perfect poem, post, content, and book. With this in mind, Brian unleashed the sword in the stone once more. With a flash of cold light, a streak of silver-white energy shot out, aiming straight for Dr. Lizard's back. Brian's movements were both quick and slow. Just as he launched his strike, Spider-Man leaped out, and Steve followed suit. As luck would have it, their sword energies coincided, forming a line. Peter Parker, using his spider sense, was the first to react. His face paled at the sight of the silver-white energy, and then, seeing Steve blocking his path, his eyes nearly popped out, and he screamed, "Look out!" Steve hadn't realized it, but upon hearing Peter Parker's warning, he reacted immediately. His newly recovered shield swung, narrowly missing behind him, narrowly blocking the sword energy. He was catching up late at night, completely sleepy. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.